Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm excited to share a brand new Naruto fanfiction with you. This Uchiha is way too cautious. In this story, Uchiha Kei isn't your typical reckless ninja. Ever since he arrived in this world, he's been unbelievably careful, doing everything possible to survive and avoid making any fatal mistakes. But fate has other plans. When he's assigned to join Minato Namikaze's squad on the dangerous mission to destroy the Kannabi Bridge, Kei realizes he's completely out of his depth, and maybe out of luck. If you enjoy stories about strategy, survival, and the hidden side of the Uchiha, you're going to love this one. Want to access the next part early or read all the chapters yourself? Check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/MV1717. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Alright, let's dive into This Uchiha is Way Too Cautious.
Part 1, This Uchiha is Way Too Cautious. Huff. Huff. Heavy breathing echoed through the dark room. Uchiha Kei opened his eyes and looked into the mirror at his crimson Sharingan, the three tomos spinning slowly. He couldn't help but sigh. Another failure. He had lost count of how many times he'd failed. Despite the disappointment gnawing at his heart, Kei forced himself to stay focused and began writing down his observations in a notebook. The language he used wasn't Japanese, it was pure Chinese. After all, Kei wasn't originally from this world. He had once been an ordinary earthling, but due to a strange accident, he ended up in this bloody, unforgiving world. When he first realized he had become a member of the Uchiha clan, Kei had been ecstatic. But the joy didn't last. Reality hit hard, and fast. In this world, weakness was a sin. Maybe it was because he was used to modern society, but Kei found it difficult to accept the brutality of this era. And in terms of talent, he was only average. If not for his identity as a transmigrator, blessed with unusually strong spiritual energy, and his ability to barely scrape by with his Sharingan on the battlefield, he might have been dead and buried long ago. Sometimes, he truly admired the ninja of this world. Kids were trained to kill by the age of 6 or 7. It was normal for 10-year-olds to be thrown into war. Look at Kakashi, he was already a jonin with countless kills by the age of 12. Kei knew his limits. That's why he had never dared to reveal his Sharingan lightly. Even when he went to war, he kept it hidden, cautious to the extreme. Until he had the Mangekyo Sharingan, he didn't believe he had the qualifications to act recklessly. With that kind of power, maybe, just maybe, he'd have some hope of surviving. As for what to do after obtaining the Mangekyo, that was a problem for another time. If he couldn't even reach that level, then he had no right to think any further. Maybe the emotional stimulus just isn't strong enough. Kei muttered, jotting down his most recent experience. He knew the Sharingan better than most. He understood how it awakened, and how it evolved. Simply put, the Sharingan responded to intense emotional trauma, grief, rage, desperation. It wasn't surprising people called the Uchiha a clan of lunatics. Especially the Mangekyo, it needed even more extreme emotional upheaval. The brain's chakra needed to violently stimulate the optic nerves, triggering a reconstruction that resulted in new abilities. Because he understood all this, Kei had been trying to awaken it himself. Compared to the Hyuga clan next door, the Uchiha actually had it easy. If he'd been born a Byakugan-wielding Hyuga instead, he might have already been 6 feet under. In his memories, even prodigies like Niji Hyuga were nothing more than background characters, strong, sure, but ultimately disposable. The rest of the Hyuga weren't even worth mentioning. If you didn't count the whole clan massacre thing. So what exactly is going wrong? Kei stroked his chin thoughtfully. Is it that my emotional stimulus isn't deep enough? Is my genjutsu not strong enough? Or is it because I know it's fake, so my subconscious just rejects it? It was frustrating. Kei had been using genjutsu on himself, subtle, immersive illusions designed to trick his own mind. It worked to some extent. His Sharingan had reached the third tomo, proving the method had merit. But that last step. The leap to Mangekyo. He just couldn't cross it. He'd never heard of any other Uchiha using this method, so maybe it only worked for him. But no matter how often he tried, no matter how real the illusion, he could never quite trigger the necessary emotional surge. Worse yet, the war outside was nearing its end, or rather, entering its most dangerous phase. Most of the smaller villages had already surrendered. The few that remained were throwing everything into one final, desperate assault. It was the most dangerous time of all. Kei had managed to survive the battle so far, but he wasn't confident about what came next. Maybe I've hit some kind of threshold, he thought as he packed away his journal. Or has my mind developed a resistance? But mental energy doesn't work like an immune system. Right? No matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't find a clear answer. All he knew was that the days ahead would be anything but peaceful. It was already year 47 of the Hidden Leaf calendar. In another year, the fourth Hokage would take office. And for now, the war was at its most chaotic. The Battle of Kikyo Pass had ended. Sunagakure had surrendered. The only major enemy left was Iwagakure. Ironically, Kei had to thank the bizarre tactics of Iwagakure. If they hadn't sneak-attacked the Kumogakure, forcing the third Raikage to hold the line alone for 3 days and nights before dying of exhaustion, Konoha might have been crushed in a pincer attack. But thanks to that mess, Konoha only had one enemy left. And with Minato Namikaze stalling the enemy single-handedly, the odds were finally shifting. Still, Iwa and Kumo were not to be underestimated. The Kannabi Bridge battle should be happening soon, Kei murmured. That's when Kakashi inherits Obito's Sharingan and becomes the copy ninja. He carefully sealed all his journals with a hand sign, then stored them away with utmost caution. Japanese and Chinese had many similarities. If these records ever got lost, Kei would be in serious trouble. He had written down everything he could remember about the Naruto timeline, to keep his mind sharp and avoid missing any important events. This way, he could avoid disasters, or take advantage of opportunities, no matter when they arose. With everything packed up, Kei sighed deeply. 3-tomo Sharingan just wasn't enough. Without the Mangekyo, how could he possibly face the monsters that were coming? He wasn't even talking about the major threats yet. Just surviving the Uchiha massacre in a few years would be nearly impossible. I need to figure something out soon, he muttered, eyes narrowing. Otherwise, I'll be just another name on Uchiha Itachi's kill list. Early the next morning, after completing a simple round of training, Uchiha Kei made his way toward the rendezvous point. During wartime, every ninja was a valuable asset, regardless of their background. Even clans as prominent as the Uchiha and Hyuga were expected to send their members to the front lines to protect the village. Of course, the reality was more nuanced than the ideal. Take the Hyuga clan, for example, the majority of those sent to fight were from the branch family. Thanks to the cursed seal known as the caged bird, the main house didn't need to worry about others stealing their Byakugan. This policy became even more rigid after an incident where a main house member died at the hands of Kirigakure and had a Byakugan taken. The Uchiha weren't foolish either. While some of their Sharingan users were deployed, they were usually assigned to relatively safe zones. Those without awakened Sharingan, on the other hand, were subject to the village's complete discretion, sent wherever they were most needed. Kei fell into that category. He had never once revealed his Sharingan in front of others. Without a solid safety net, he'd rather keep a low profile. War was dangerous, sure, but ending up on Konoha's internal blacklist would be far worse. This approach had its pros and cons. The downside was obvious: Kei was exposed to great danger. But the upside was that his Jonin instructor would be someone the village deeply trusted, a so-called Konoha loyalist. Just like how Obito Uchiha, once considered a hopeless failure, was fortunate enough to have Minato Namikaze as his Jonin mentor. Kei was in the same graduating class as Obito, but luck hadn't been so kind to him. His first Jonin commander had died during a mission, sacrificing himself to protect the team. His current team leader was a lesser-known Jonin named Fukuhiko Heiei, someone loyal to the Hokage's faction. As for Kei's teammates, just a couple of nobodies, not Might Guy, not Kurinai, not Asuma, or even Genma. One was a civilian ninja named Imai Kenta, a taijutsu specialist known for his quick thinking and sharp instincts, one of the rare survivors since the war began. The other was a much more complex character, Hyuga Ayaka, a member of the Hyuga branch family. Just like her name suggested, she was sharp, calculating, and cunning, dangerously so. Kei's relationship with his teammates was neutral at best. They weren't close, but there was no deep resentment either. Their team had gone through several iterations due to wartime casualties. Through many shared missions, Kei had learned how devious both of them could be beneath the surface. In times like these, surviving often meant being shrewd. And none of them had made it this far by being anything less than clever. "You're late. Is this what all Uchiha are like?" Ayaka scowled as Kei finally arrived at the rendezvous. "We've got a mission." "A mission?" Kei nodded calmly, but quickly glanced around. "Where's team leader? Why is it just the three of us?" Imai, who had been sitting quietly cleaning his weapons, looked up. "Captain left about half an hour ago with a group of other Jonin. He's already headed to the front lines. The Iwagakure forces are pressing hard. We've been assigned a separate mission." The Battle of Kikyo Pass had been brutal. Konoha had barely dealt with the Suna before Iwa struck, giving the village no time to regroup. The saying, "kill 10,000, lose 3,000, had never been more real. Konoha was exhausted, and Iwagakure had clearly come to take advantage. Ironically, Iwa had also attacked the Kyumo, leading to the death of the third Reikage, who had held off 10,000 Iwa nin alone for 3 days and nights so his comrades could retreat. Thanks to that reckless ambition, Konoha was spared a two-front war. Otherwise, things might have turned out far worse. "So, what's our mission?" Kei asked, eyes narrowing. "And who's in charge now?" "You are," Ayaka replied flatly, clearly displeased. "We've been assigned to provide support for the Namikaze Minato squad. Our job is to assist them in completing their mission. During war, ninja teams operated with a strict military structure, far more disciplined than what was depicted in the manga. And yet, what Ayaka just said made Kei frown even deeper. This mission sounded like a classic bait and distract operation. They hadn't been told what Minato's squad was doing, only that they were to support them. Both Kenta and Ayaka understood they were being used as decoys, but they had no idea what the real objective was. But Kei did know. Minato's team was heading to destroy the Kannabi Bridge, a crucial supply route. That meant they, Kei's team, were the sacrificial pawns, meant to draw the enemy's attention while the real mission was carried out. In the original story, Kakashi's squad didn't encounter much resistance during their mission. And that begged the question, why was such an important location so lightly guarded? The only explanation was that someone else had drawn away the bulk of the enemy forces, which now appeared to be them. Worse, Kei remembered that after Obito's death, a flood of Iwa nin had appeared. Clearly, most of the decoy team had been wiped out. And if Kei's memories serve him right, it was during this same mission that Obito was taken by Uchiha Madara, implying that there was an old Uchiha base somewhere near the bridge. Kei sighed inwardly. He didn't have the luxury of refusing this mission. During wartime, deserters fared far worse than those who simply died in battle. "How many squads are involved in the support operation?" he asked. "And how deep are we expected to go?" 6 other teams are part of the support unit, Ayaka replied swiftly. "As for how far we go, we haven't been told. Our job is to draw the enemy's attention and hold them off." What a damn nightmare of a mission. Kei cursed silently. Still, the fact that there were other teams involved gave him some hope. It wasn't a death sentence, at least, not a guaranteed one. He had hidden his abilities well, and with the experience he'd gathered from previous missions, he was confident he could make it out alive, if he played it smart. Alright then. Let's move. Without another word, Kei sprinted toward the village gate. Since this was a mission, there was no time to waste. Kenta and Ayaka followed close behind. Just as they were about to leave the village, they spotted a familiar group. It was Minato's team, also preparing to head out. Kei's expression darkened slightly as he glanced at them. They were walking toward destiny. And so was he. Uchiha Kei didn't spare them even a glance, let alone a greeting, as he quickly sped out of the village. It wasn't that he held any grudge against Minato, Kakashi, or the others. On the contrary, Kei actually admired them. But this particular mission left him in no mood for pleasantries. Imai Kenta and Hyuga Ayaka felt the same. After giving one last glance toward Minato's squad, they silently followed Kei into the forest. To draw Iwagakure's attention away from Minato's team, they had to split up. Sticking together would only interfere with the mission. They sprinted through the woods, headed toward the mission objective. Sunlight filtered through the towering trees, casting broken shadows across the forest floor. Amid the interplay of light and shadow, three small figures dashed effortlessly from branch to branch, leaving fleeting afterimages behind them. In this dim light, their movements were barely noticeable, even the sharpest birds in the forest remained undisturbed. Kei had already formed a strategy before departure: reach the destination as quickly as possible and stay hidden. With a member of the Hyuga clan on their team, they had a huge advantage. At the very least, they could scout enemy movements before making their next move. Still, Kei understood how dangerous this mission was. He couldn't refuse it, but he had no intention of dying either. So he needed a plan. After 3 days of traveling, the three of them finally crossed the border and entered the land of grass. However, under Kei's orders, they deliberately avoided the main Konoha forces stationed there. This decision puzzled both Kenta and Ayaka, but as wartime shinobi, they had no choice but to obey their squad leader. Let's take a break. Once they reached a forest deep within the grass country, Kei finally stopped and sat down to rest. They needed to conserve their strength to face whatever battle might come next. Byakugan, activate. Without waiting for instructions, Hyuga Ayaka activated her Byakugan and scanned their surroundings. She understood just how precarious their situation was. If she wanted to survive, she couldn't afford to let her guard down. No threats nearby, she reported quietly after a moment, deactivating her dojutsu. Kei nodded. Good. We've arrived in the target area. We'll be heading deeper soon, so now's the time to talk strategy. Let me ask you both, do you want to survive this? His blunt question caught both teammates off guard. Neither had expected Kei to be so direct. They exchanged glances but wisely remained silent. Anyone who'd graduated from the ninja academy and made it this far into the war without dying wasn't an idiot. Both of them understood the true nature of this mission. Konoha had sent them to serve as decoys to hold back Iwagakure forces. In other words, cannon fodder. There were ways to stay alive. The smartest tactic was to linger along the border between fire and grass country, engage in light skirmishes, and wait out the war. Both of them had likely thought of this. But even if you thought it, or even did it, you could never say it aloud. That's how politics worked. Kei's blunt question had just cut off their escape route. If they admitted what they were thinking, their careers would be over. Kei remained silent, leaning casually against a tree with a faint smirk on his lips. Of course he knew what they were thinking. He'd spent days coming up with all kinds of plans, only to discard them all. Maybe his teammates could coast through the war and survive by doing nothing. But as team leader, Kei didn't have that luxury. If he played it safe and returned to the village empty-handed, he'd be condemned for delaying the mission. His name would be ruined. He understood full well that even without their help, Iwagakure probably wouldn't last much longer. But not everyone saw the bigger picture like he did. The higher-ups in Konoha always needed a scapegoat to maintain their glorious image. If things went wrong, they'd pin the blame on someone, preferably someone from the Uchiha clan they already distrusted. Kei wasn't about to volunteer as their fall guy. Nor would he let his teammates think they could get away with doing nothing. Whether or not they truly meant to slack off, Kei had to kill that idea in its tracks. He didn't want to die, but he wanted even less to be the one blamed for others' failure. "What's the matter?" Kei said with a mocking tone, reaching into his ninja pouch behind his back. "Is that such a hard question to answer?" He was fully prepared to strike. If either of them dared say the wrong thing, he was ready to kill one and escape. He didn't think it would come to that, but he had to be cautious. Finally, Ayaka and Kenta exchanged another look, and Ayaka gritted her teeth. "Captain, you know what this mission really is, don't you?" "Of course I do," Kei replied with a smirk. "That's exactly why I'm asking you what you plan to do." "We'll complete our mission," Kenta said with a smile that looked gentle but hid sharp intent. "But we should be smart about it. We've got the Byakugan, might as well use it to our advantage." "Good idea," Kei said nonchalantly, lowering his guard. As expected, they didn't dare act rashly. Attacking him would count as betrayal, and betraying Konoha was far worse than harboring doubts about a mission. They also knew Kei wasn't someone to mess with. The three of them had survived countless missions and watched countless teammates die. There was a reason these three were still alive. But now all three had the same silent thought: great. We've run into someone just as cunning as we are. With 3 seasoned tricksters in the same team, it was going to be a battle of wits, and will to survive. "All right then. We'll find a good spot and do our job," Kei said with a casual grin. "Kenta's right. Let's make full use of our Byakugan. Once we reach the target zone, we'll rely on Ayaka to help us scout." "No problem," she replied. "But what's the next step after that?" "Simple," Kei said. "Find an area with fewer enemies, and ambush them. There are other squads besides us, right?" Ayaka and Kenta both gave a silent nod. They got it now. This wasn't about completing the mission the way the higher-ups expected, it was about surviving it smartly. People tend to hate others who are just like themselves, and Uchiha Kei, Hyuga Ayaka, and Imai Kenta were no exception. The three of them barely spoke as they moved forward, the tension so thick it could be cut with a kunai. Kei could practically feel the murderous intent from the other two. Were they seriously considering taking him out? Not that he was scared. If anything, Kei might even welcome it. It'd save him the trouble of putting up with this idiotic mission. And if there was one thing he was good at, it was running. Maybe his overall ninja skills weren't top tier, but Kei had mastered one technique better than most, the body flicker technique. If a fight really broke out, he could activate his Sharingan, flicker in to take one down, and vanish before the others even realized what happened. He could then report them for attacking a fellow leaf ninja, maybe even pin them as traitors. Let the Yamanaka clan dig through the survivors' memories and confirm the truth. He'd be in the clear. Unfortunately, those two weren't that dumb. They never made a move. Suddenly, Kenta came to a halt and gave a hand signal, enemy presence. Kenta had sharp senses. As a taijutsu-focused swordsman, his physical perception, especially his sense of smell, was impressive. Ayaka activated her Byakugan, veins bulging around her eyes, giving her a far more grotesque appearance than the elegant manga depiction. 6, she mouthed silently. 6. At least 2 squads. During war, it wasn't unusual for squads to be under strength. That was a bit of good news, fewer enemies meant better odds. What they didn't know was whether any of them were Jonin. None of the 3 were Jonin themselves. This wasn't a team of prodigies. They weren't Kakashi-level monsters who made Jonin by age 12. Just regular Chunin, no more, no less. Still, 6 enemies made for decent spoils. Their forehead protectors alone would be valuable. Kei signaled to the others. The trio scattered, vanishing into the treetops to set up an ambush. Kei hid beneath a patch of low foliage and activated his Sharingan. 3 Tomo spun lazily in his crimson eyes. With his teammates distracted, he could use his abilities freely. Soon enough, chakra signatures appeared in his vision, 6 distinct flows. The encounter was too sudden for proper traps. A shame, they could have made this a whole lot easier. Kei took a deep breath, analyzing the situation. 1 Jonin. Good news. The rest were 2 Chunin and 3 Genin, not something to ignore, but manageable. The world of Naruto was a strange one. Even someone like Madara Uchiha could fall prey to clever schemes. Look at Black Zetsu's sweet-talking Madara. Or Naruto winning over Kaguya with his harem technique. Kei chuckled bitterly and pulled out a kunai. Still, he didn't dare attack first. Who knew if his teammates would bail the second he made a move, and judging by how still they were thinking the exact same thing. All 3 crouched in place, watching as the 6 Iwa Nin passed directly in front of them. Damn it, Kei cursed under his breath. Without their Jonin instructor Fukuhiko Heiei, this squad was a masterclass in distrust. Fine then. Fire release, Phoenix Sage Fire Jutsu. Kei suddenly formed hand signs and launched a fire technique toward the Iwa Nin, conveniently also covering the area where Kenta was hiding. A beat later, Kei created a shadow clone and used a substitution jutsu to shift back to a safe vantage point atop a tree, watching it all unfold. Kenta couldn't keep hiding anymore. Cursing Kei with every foul word he knew, he leapt out with a flash of steel. Draw. Strike. Evade. It was fluid and lethal. 1 Iwa Genin didn't react in time and was cut down instantly. Kei smirked. That bastard Kenta wasn't exactly innocent either, his evasive roll landed right where Ayaka was hiding. The ambush was botched. The Iwa Nin were shaken, but they weren't amateurs. They quickly regrouped. A storm of kunai filled the air. Kenta retreated. Ayaka had no choice but to abandon stealth, gritting her teeth and leaping into the open. Just 2 kids, the Iwa Jonin scoffed. What guts? Kill them. Not that he even needed to give the order. The Chunin and Genin had already drawn their weapons, charging at Kenta and Ayaka. The Jonin, though, held back. Something was off. 4-man squads were standard. Only 2 had shown themselves. Even accounting for losses, someone was missing. He hesitated. Until he caught a chill down his spine, a terrible, paralyzing sense of danger. Fast. Too fast. He felt his clothes tear, and blood. A kunai had slashed his back. On instinct, he performed a substitution jutsu, vanishing at the last possible moment. Simple techniques worked best in critical moments, and a Jonin would know that. As he reappeared, his eyes darted back to his previous spot. Standing there was a boy, eyes glowing crimson with 3 spinning tomo. Sharingan. Uchiha. He realized immediately what he was up against. Uchiha, even a young one, was never to be underestimated. Ideally, you faced one with backup. Never alone. But the rest of his squad was tangled up. And this Uchiha kid was fast, far faster than expected. Then his eyes went wide. The boy had disappeared again. And now, there was a cool sensation on his neck. So fast. The kunai in Uchiha Kei's hand glided cleanly across the Jonin's throat, not too forceful, not too light, just enough to be lethal. This level of precision had long since become second nature to him. After all, he'd been here for years. And he'd spent many of them on the battlefield. By modern standards, it was still something hard to fully accept. But at the very least, he'd learned to find a certain calm amidst the chaos. Through mental conditioning and self-hypnosis, Kei convinced himself that killing enemies was no different than grinding mobs in a game from his past life. Not entirely weightless, but easier to carry. Such was the reality of the ninja world, kill or be killed. Kei had long since forced himself to adapt. This Jonin wasn't anything special. Not exactly weak, but far from versatile. And though he'd been on guard, Kei's speed was simply too overwhelming. Still, there wasn't a shred of pride on Kei's face. He knew better than anyone what his limits were. His learning speed had never been particularly impressive, even with the Sharingan, he was only considered average among geniuses. And as for the Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique? Sure, his speed seemed impressive. But Kei was painfully aware that someone like Minato Namikaze, even without the Flying Thunder God technique, could probably outpace anyone in the entire ninja world. Not to mention another freak from the Uchiha clan, Shisui. Known in the future as Shisui of the Body Flicker, that name alone spoke volumes about how fast he really was. Of course, Kei suspected Shisui's Mangekyo Sharingan had something to do with it, too. Turning his gaze to the battlefield, Kei quickly assessed the situation. Imai Kenta, after a few swift dodges, suddenly surged forward like a flash of light toward a Chunin opponent. The burst of speed was stunning, like a streak of lightning, catching the Chunin completely off guard. Unprepared, the enemy raised his kunai to defend himself. But just as the two weapons were about to clash, Kenta's wrist flicked, and his blade danced like it had a will of its own, curving around the kunai and slicing cleanly across the man's throat. The two shadows passed each other. A red bloom of blood splashed into the air. One strike. Clean and precise. On the other side, Hyuga Ayaka was locked in battle with another enemy, both silhouettes flickering through the trees. With her Byakugan and gentle fist, she could hold her own against a Jonin, so a Chunin posed little threat. Sure enough, after a brief exchange, she found an opening and delivered a decisive palm strike. The enemy coughed up blood and flew back like a launched projectile, crashing through a tree before collapsing to the ground. By now, the battle was almost over. One Jonin and two Chunins were down. Not to mention the genin Kei had ambushed earlier. All that remained were two terrified genin, frozen in place, trembling with their kunai clutched tightly. Watching them, Kei couldn't help but see a reflection of his former self, back when he'd first stepped onto the battlefield. Though he felt a flicker of pity, he knew better than to let it linger. Clean up the field. The blood stench is too strong, he said calmly, sighing inwardly. And next time, be more decisive when you strike. Yes, Captain. Imai Kenta answered with his usual innocent grin, as if he'd completely forgotten how Kei had baited him earlier. Humph! Hyuga Ayaka gave a cold snort, her Byakugan locking onto Kei. Kei-kun, your speed is truly beyond expectations. With that kind of Shunshin, you'd be a powerful ninja even without the Sharingan. Ha! The Sharingan is a great tool, who wouldn't want one, even outside the Uchiha clan? Kei replied nonchalantly, then added with a teasing tone, still, I value freedom more. Don't you agree, Ayaka-chan? When it came to sarcasm, Kei was no amateur. And her comment? It didn't faze him at all. After all, it wasn't like he didn't have a Sharingan, he just chose not to flaunt it. But for someone like Ayaka, a member of the Hyuga branch family, the word freedom was a far more cutting blow. Sure enough, her expression darkened. Faint chakra ripples flickered along her hands. No point pretending. If you really wanted to fight me, you wouldn't even need your Byakugan, Kei said with a smirk. Sorry, I was too blunt. Maybe I should have masked my opinion a little better. Captain, Ayaka-chan, what about these two? Kenta scratched his head, interrupting the rising tension. They're just genin, but we might be able to extract some intel. Humph. Just kill them, Ayaka replied coldly, withdrawing her chakra. That Chunin isn't dead yet. We'll get more from him than these trembling fools. Time for you to shine, Kei-kun, don't disappoint us with your genjutsu. With that, she moved toward the two genin before they could react. Her palms shot forward in 2 clean strikes, right to their chests. Kei didn't even need to look to know they were finished. Apparently, Ayaka had taken out all her anger on those 2 poor genin. He had nothing to say about it. Their fate didn't concern him. He walked over to the fallen Chunin, confirming that the guy was still alive, barely. But the man's condition wasn't good. In real life, unlike in manga, even jonin needed time and effort to kill a Chunin if they didn't land a fatal blow. Unfortunately, this one ran into a bloodline ninja like Ayaka. Bloodline users weren't bound by normal rules. And with his teammates dead and even their jonin leader slain by Kei, what kind of will to fight could he possibly have left? After a quick examination, Kei was fairly certain the man wouldn't wake up anytime soon. Which meant they'd have to carry him along. Standing up, Kei looked toward Kenta. Kenta, he's yours. He won't wake up for a while, so bring him with us. All right. Got it. Kenta hesitated, then gave his trademark goofy smile. And Ayaka, Kei continued, turning to her, find us a cave. We need to rest and regroup. Humph, fine, leave it to me. She snorted again, then added with a hint of suspicion, what about you? Me? Kei raised a brow. I'll be planning our next move. And I need rest too, don't forget, I was the one who killed the jonin. As a member of the Uchiha clan, the task of interrogation naturally fell to Kei. There was a common perception that the Uchiha were masters of genjutsu. While not entirely accurate, it was a deeply rooted belief. Not every Uchiha excelled at illusion techniques, having a Sharingan only meant they were better equipped to use or resist genjutsu, not necessarily proficient in it. Kei's interrogation style was calm and composed. The captive had a strong will, but Kei's genjutsu wasn't something easily brushed off. Besides, the man had already been beaten to a pulp by Ayaka Hyuga and was barely clinging to consciousness. Kei also had no qualms about using a few underhanded tricks during the process. After nearly a full day of work, Kei finally extracted the intel he wanted, and even stumbled upon something particularly interesting. A transport unit is moving Konoha prisoners deep into IWA territory. Naturally, Kei had no intention of handling this alone. He relayed the intel to the other 2, though not all at once. The world of Naruto was a strange one. In the 13 years Kei had lived in it, he'd experienced nothing but its darker sides. Just look at the suicide of Tsukumo Hatake a few years ago. Yet, when watching the show back in his past life, it was filled with bright ideals, constantly emphasizing bonds and how comrades are more important than missions. But in reality? Sure, comrades were important, especially in wartime, where your teammate might just be the one to take a kunai for you. History is written by the victors. Kei understood this well. He knew why Tsukumo had drawn so much ire, it was wartime. Without powerhouse individuals like the first Hokage or Madara to tip the scales, the power of a single person was often irrelevant. Tsukumo wasn't wrong, he was just born in the wrong era. Add someone like Danzo stirring the pot behind the scenes, and Konoha lost one of its top combatants. Still, his death served as a brutal warning to other shinobi, don't overthink things, if your hesitation costs the mission, you're as good as dead. In Naruto's era of peace, priorities shifted. Without the constant threat of war, teachings leaned more toward camaraderie. Bonds became a method of keeping people loyal to the village. If you're emotionally tied down, are you really going to defect? If it were any other day, Kei wouldn't give a damn about these prisoners. He had his own survival to worry about. But he knew how things would unfold. The war would end within the year. The third Hokage was preparing to hand things over to Minato Namikaze, a major shift in direction. Minato believed in Tsukumo's ideals. He also happened to be Kakashi's Jonin instructor. Without his support, both Kakashi and Obito might have been locked up even if Konoha won the war. Captain, you're not seriously thinking of rescuing them, are you? Ayaka Hyuga sneered at Kei. Don't forget our mission. Or do you want to be the next Tsukumo Hatake? We'll follow the transport and infiltrate enemy lines, Kei replied calmly. We might get even more intel that way. You're insane, Ayaka scoffed. Are you trying to get us killed? Or thrown in Konoha prison? You really think that's likely? Kei shook his head. The fact that we're even alive says a lot already. I want to make it back, and so do you. So we'd better work together, got it? That shut her up. Even the usually carefree Kenta Imai glanced over seriously. They were all in the same boat, after all. And the type of people who couldn't say everything out loud. What they didn't know was that Kei had already started planning for the future. He was considering this a sort of political investment. Of course, none of that would matter if he didn't make it out alive. So what's your plan? Ayaka asked as she sat down casually. Then, without looking, she hurled a kunai into the neck of the half-dead Iwa Nin. You're not seriously planning to assault their rear lines, right? I'm out if you are. I haven't lived long enough yet. Don't worry, I'm not that dumb, I'm only 13. Kei chuckled. The prisoners are being sent to the rear, but according to this guy, there are still smaller holding sites along the way. That's not surprising, Ayaka crossed her arms. It'd be stupid to keep them all in one place. Iwa isn't exactly known for sealing techniques, she stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at Kei, then fell into thought. Kenta, who'd been all smiles, also turned quiet. Keeping prisoners scattered minimized risks. They were tortured constantly, likely filled with hate for their captors. And since most of Iwa's forces were focused on the front lines, the guards left behind probably weren't elite, maybe even just a few low-ranking ninja tasked with cleanup. And by cleanup, it likely meant executing the difficult ones and relocating the rest for bargaining chips. But the real question was, had they been relocated yet? How much time do we have? Ayaka asked. And who was that guy? One of the guards, sent to the front 2 days ago. Ran into us yesterday, Kei answered with a smirk. You really are. Unbelievable. Ayaka paused, then nodded. If we move fast, we might actually save quite a few. Then let's go, Kenta chimed in, wearing that harmless smile again. Let's rescue our comrades, and finish our mission. Under the roaring blaze of the fire release, the Iwagakure Chunin was completely reduced to ashes. Uchiha Kei and his team quickly set off again, now with a much clearer goal in mind. But as Kei glanced at his two companions, he couldn't help but feel a little conflicted. These two were too smart for their own good, smart to the point of being a headache. Unfortunately, he really did need their help. There were things he simply couldn't do alone. Although Kei speculated that the enemy forces guarding the captured shinobi were likely genin, who was to say a jonin hadn't been left behind to protect the rear. Or perhaps even reinforcements had circled back, knowing what the future held, Kei saw no harm in making some calculated investments, as long as it didn't compromise his own plans. As for saving those captured Konoha shinobi, that was just a bonus, something that would help him complete his mission more efficiently. He didn't need to ask to know what they'd been through. Those prisoners surely harbored deep hatred toward the Iwagakure shinobi, perhaps even paralyzing fear. But the fact that they were still alive meant one thing: they hadn't cracked yet. Don't assume for a second that confessing earns mercy. In fact, the moment a prisoner loses value, they're often the first to be eliminated. With a war on two fronts, logistics, supply lines, and prisoner processing all take time. Iwagakure wouldn't waste resources on so-called traitors, who had nothing left to offer. Of course, Kei couldn't be 100% certain, but with things like genjutsu in play, there was little need for prolonged secrecy. The ones still breathing were simply those with enough willpower to resist torture and illusions. Kei's objective was simple: rescue them, then weaponize their hatred for Iwa to stir up chaos behind enemy lines. It was a shameless move, no doubt, but hatred can cloud judgment. Even if those prisoners were weak, their very presence in enemy territory could throw everything into disarray. Whether any of them survived? That wasn't Kei's concern. All he needed to do was get them out, hint at their objective, and chances were they'd throw themselves into the fight, willingly, even. And if they refused to help, then Kei could always, accidentally, let an enemy escape, one that would conveniently leak information and draw Iwabakure's attention to the rear. In short, a perfect distraction to let Minato's squad complete their real mission. Of course, none of this could be said out loud. Even hinting at it was dangerous. But both Ayaka Hyuga and Kenta Imai caught on fast. Kei had to admit, they were sharp, and perhaps even a little ruthless in their determination to survive. Still, it puzzled him. How could two people this clever not even be mentioned in the original story? The more he thought about it, the more he suspected this mission might be why. Maybe they didn't make it out. Or maybe they turned rogue to survive. Missions like this had low survival odds. Whether Minato's team succeeded or not, these decoys, the distractions, were guaranteed to be cannon fodder. If the mission failed, they'd have to finish it themselves, a grim, unspoken rule. If the mission succeeded, even worse, they'd face Iwabakure's full wrath. A guaranteed death sentence either way. Unless, of course, they became rogue ninja. That would be the simpler path. A single slash across their forehead protectors, severing all ties. They'd vanish from the battlefield and find a quiet corner of the world to hide. No more ambition. No more wars. Just survival. And honestly, Kei wouldn't blame them. If it came to that, he might just do the same. Better alive and forgotten than dead and remembered. After 2 days of careful, cautious movement, the three of them finally caught sight of a group of captured Konoha shinobi being escorted deep into Iwabakure's territory. By now, they were fully behind enemy lines. They'd already begun encountering regular patrols, close calls that, if not for Ayaka's Byakugan, might have ended in disaster. If we move quickly, we can get them out safely, she added, her white eyes narrowing. Where's the nearest enemy support post? Kei asked, still analyzing the situation. Roughly 3 to 4 kilometers away, and they're moving in the opposite direction, Ayaka reported after scanning the area. So if we act fast, we should be fine. Kenta Imai grinned. Captain, we could try circling around and setting some traps. Paper bombs or something. Might just work like a charm. Setting traps was standard procedure for any shinobi squad, especially against slow-moving groups like these. If they could predict the enemy's route, laying ambushes was easy. And Kenta's idea aligned perfectly with Kei's own. Paper bombs might make noise, but that might not be a bad thing right now. Even Ayaka hadn't bothered suggesting a silent approach. Too conspicuous, Kei said after a moment's thought. Our mission is to rescue, not draw the whole enemy army down on us. He paused, then continued, set the traps anyway. Once they're triggered, you two will strike from the flanks. I'll hit them head-on with fire release. Got it? Understood, Captain. Working with smart people made things so much easier. The two nodded and got to work. Though paper bombs were tempting, sometimes more conventional methods had better results, and drew less suspicion. It didn't take long for them to finish setting a basic ambush. Then, in silence, the three disappeared into the forest, each taking up position around the path. Now all that remained, was to wait for the prey to walk straight into their trap. Silently perched atop a tall tree, Uchiha Kei carefully activated his Sharingan, scanning the surroundings. Hyuga, Ayaka and Imai Kenta were already in position. Neither of them even glanced in Kei's direction, which gave him the courage to use his Sharingan without worry. While observing the subtle chakra fluctuations in the forest, Kei was also planning his strategy. He had already made some preparations, but how to execute them was still worth considering. He had decided to forego using explosive tags. The noise would draw too much attention and put them in a dangerous position. Even though their mission was cooperative with other Konoha squads, it didn't align with Kei's real goal, survival. So, to achieve their objective and draw enemy attention, the best substitute would naturally be a fire-style jutsu. But the size and range of the fire technique had to be carefully considered. Too large, and it would be like a beacon in the night, an obvious target. Too small, and it wouldn't attract enough of the Iwanin's attention, making it harder for Kei and his team to move. Unfortunately, time waits for no one. While Kei was still weighing his options, the Iwanin escorting a group of Konoha prisoners stepped right into their ambush zone. There was no time to hesitate. Kei immediately deactivated his Sharingan and focused. This squad wasn't particularly large, just a complete four-man unit. They formed a diamond formation around the captured Konoha ninja. Still, the Iwanin at the back looked visibly nervous, even though the Konoha prisoners were all in bad shape. They didn't dare get too close. The one leading, however, seemed formidable. That alone raised a red flag for Kei. Swish. Swish. Swish, the sound of projectiles slicing through the air rang out the moment the Iwanin stepped into the trap. Though sudden, the enemy clearly anticipated it. This was a battlefield, after all, even if it was close to their rear lines. The frontmost Iwanin had sharp reflexes and possibly elite training. He calmly pulled out his kunai and deflected all the incoming projectiles. The thrown weapons weren't just aimed at the Iwanin, they also covered the Konoha captives. Kei instantly realized this must have been Hyuga Ayaka acting on her own. But he didn't blame her. It was a way to test how the Iwanin treated their prisoners. Even if it risked injury, it could reveal valuable intel. If Kei were in her shoes, he might have done the same. It was harsh, but deception and information were just as valuable as direct attacks. The other three Iwanin, clearly unnerved, lost formation even though they weren't injured. This time, Ayaka and Kenta didn't give Kei a headache like before. They charged the moment the formation scattered. And Kei knew, this was his cue. Forming hand seals at lightning speed, Kei completed his jutsu in under a second. Fire style, Dragon Fire Jutsu. Although Dragon Fire is only a C-rank technique, maximizing its potential usually requires specific tools, like wires or rods, and a strong chakra supply. But Kei didn't care about that. Their target was the man standing guard, the one who gave Kei a bad feeling. Sure enough, the enemy's attention had shifted backward. But his reaction speed was still incredible. In just one breath, he leapt out of the way, dodging Kei's ambush. Then again, Kei never expected this jutsu to kill him. Fire-style techniques had more strategic than lethal uses. In fact, in the original series, Kei could barely recall anyone actually dying from them in combat. He mostly used them to clear scenes or serve as a diversion. Drawing his kunai, Kei instantly closed the distance with a body flicker. His speed was impressive, but the enemy had been on high alert and quickly responded. Clang, the clashing kunai sent a spark flying and echoed with a sharp metallic sound. So fast, Kei's heart sank. This Iwanin's speed and power were intimidating. If this were a straight-up fight, who knew what would have happened, but this was the life of a ninja. Ambushes weren't dirty, they were survival. Kei didn't feel guilty in the slightest. Still, Kei didn't let his guard down. A sneak attack was just the first step. Turning that edge into victory was what mattered now. Clang! 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 Their silhouettes flickered between the trees, locked in fierce close combat. The longer Kei fought, the more frustrated he became. Just how unlucky am I? He had barely stepped into this mission and already run into two jonin. Thinking back, maybe his luck had always been terrible. His first team had been ambushed by one jonin and three chunin. If not for his captain's sacrifice and Kei's own cunning, he wouldn't have survived. After being shuffled through several teams, Kei always survived, but his teams usually didn't. Sometimes, he felt like a walking calamity. Other times, he fancied himself as Seven Sauce, a joke persona who just couldn't die, no matter the odds. Looking at his current opponent, Kei clearly understood both his strengths and weaknesses. Without his Sharingan, he couldn't take this guy down easily. But now, Ayaka and Kenta had dealt with their enemies and were heading to assist. Kei's odds were improving. Still, he knew one thing for sure, those two probably didn't want to help him. If not for the 6 captured Konoha ninja watching, they would have turned and walked away without hesitation. He didn't know the exact details of their mission, but no one wants to play the bait. Especially behind enemy lines. You're safe now. As Uchiha Kei cut through the ropes binding the battered and bloodied Konoha shinobi, he dispelled the genjutsu they were under and offered them a rare note of reassurance. The Iwagakure Jonin they'd encountered had ultimately fallen under the combined assault of Kei's team. No matter how skilled that enemy was, facing off against 3 well-trained ninja, each of at least Chunin rank, was too much to handle. And none of these 3 were pushovers. After a prolonged and grueling battle, the IWA ninja finally met his end. "Thank you, damn those IWA bastards," muttered one of the rescued Konoha shinobi, offering his gratitude while cursing their captors in the same breath. "How are your injuries?" Kei didn't waste time with pleasantries. His real concern was whether these shinobi could still move. "This place isn't safe. We need to leave immediately. We still have a mission to carry out." "A mission?" The rescued ninja looked stunned. "Wait, wasn't your mission to rescue us?" "Rescuing you was just a bonus," Kei replied bluntly, shattering the man's hopeful assumption. "We have our own objectives. Helping you doesn't interfere with them, and in fact, you might be of use to us. Send a full squad just to rescue captives? Ridiculous." Konoha was stretched too thin on the warfront to spare that kind of manpower. The only reason Kei even bothered was because these captives held enough potential value. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lifted a finger. Such is the cruelty of war, what once seemed like simple kindness or empathy becomes a rare luxury on the battlefield. Kei didn't enjoy operating like this, but he didn't have the luxury of idealism. Not in this era. The Konoha shinobi was momentarily taken aback by Kei's words, but he quickly composed himself. A seasoned soldier of the front lines, he understood exactly what Kei meant. With the White Fang incident still fresh in everyone's mind, no one dared repeat such a mistake. As long as a ninja had value, they remained relevant. He flexed his limbs, testing his mobility. Though weak, he quickly assessed his condition. "I'll manage. Just a little weak. The others should be fine too, mostly just exhausted." Kei nodded. That was good news. Fresh captives typically only endured genjutsu interrogation, which rarely yielded useful intel. The real torment would have come later, when they were transported to the rear for full extraction procedures. Kei tilted his head slightly, eyeing the man with mild curiosity. His name had caught Kei's attention. Yamanaka, a name he was quite familiar with. That clan rarely operated alone. Typically, they'd be accompanied by members of the Nara or Akimichi clans. Yet, there were no pinecone-haired tacticians or round-bellied powerhouses in sight. Either they were dead, or had managed to escape. Not that it mattered. Seeing the flames from their earlier fire jutsu begin to spread, Kei turned sharply. "We're leaving." With the others in tow, including Yamanaka Masato, they disappeared into the trees. Moments after their departure, several Iwagakure tracking squads arrived on the scene. Unfortunately for them, both Kei and Masato were no amateurs. They had no intention of leaving easy trails behind. They weren't like those greenhorn genin a decade or so down the line, those who barely knew how to hide their tracks. One glance at the Chunin exams years later would be enough to see how far the standards had fallen. Thanks to Hyuga Ayaka's Byakugan, the group of 9 skillfully avoided all enemy patrols. Eventually, they found refuge in a cave nestled in the mountains. Kei's team was still in good shape, but the rescued shinobi were clearly reaching their limits. They had been surviving on sheer willpower, and now they needed time to rest and recover. Captain Kei, Masato said as he chewed on a piece of jerky, whose expiration date was anyone's guess, yet to him, it tasted like a 5-star meal. Can you tell us what your actual mission is? We need your help, Kei said, giving a short nod. That's why we rescued you in the first place. Our mission is to create a diversion, to draw out and pin down Iwa's defensive forces so that the Namikaze squad can complete their operation. A decoy mission? Masato paused mid-chew. Then, his expression blank, he simply continued eating. I see. Understood. We'll cooperate. Glad to hear it. Kei gave him an approving glance. As he scanned the cave, he noticed the mood had grown noticeably heavier since revealing the mission's nature. Understandable, really. Their task was essentially a suicide run, but if such missions existed, it only meant they were absolutely necessary. Everyone knew Namikaze Minato. Given his reputation, the mission he was assigned must be incredibly dangerous as well. Still, Kei found a silver lining in all this. These Konoha shinobi were surprisingly naive, in a good way. They didn't argue. They didn't protest. That alone made Kei feel better. Even Masato, a member of the well-known Yamanaka clan, simply accepted the situation. Considering the clan's long-standing ties to Konoha leadership, it made sense. Kei recalled how in the original story, the third Hokage had assigned the next generation of Inoshikacho to Sarutobi Asuma. Preparing the next generation, it wasn't hard to imagine what he was thinking. Anyone would make such arrangements for the future. Not everyone was like the second Hokage, after all. After a few more exchanges, Kei stepped out of the cave to keep watch. Precautions were necessary. Careless mistakes could bring disaster. To his mild surprise, both Imai Kenta and Hyuga Ayaka followed him out. Ayaka, without mincing words, got straight to the point. Kei, you've already guessed what the Namikaze squad's true mission is, haven't you? It seems I overestimated you too. Uchiha Kei let out a cold laugh. You couldn't even figure that out. How did you survive this long? Kei had every right to mock them. After all, as someone who already knew the truth, he held all the advantages. Especially as time went on, Kei was confident he'd gain even more control over the situation. As long as he didn't do anything reckless, things shouldn't deviate too far from the original timeline, probably. Well, even he wasn't entirely sure. He might end up doing something that changes the plot completely. But at the very least, the major events should still stay on track, right? You really did figure something out, Hyuga Ayaka said sharply. She wasn't about to be polite with Kei. As a member of the Hyuga clan, she had every right not to hold back. But even as she spoke, her mind was already working through the problem. Imai Kenta wisely kept quiet. Unlike Ayaka, he was a civilian-born shinobi. He didn't have the luxury of openly challenging someone like Uchiha Kei. He went straight into silent contemplation. What kind of mission was Namikaze Minato's team doing that required so many squads to serve as cover? Kei didn't say anything, he didn't offer clues, nor did he stop them from guessing. Technically, what they were doing was overstepping, but so what? Suddenly, Ayaka seemed to realize something. She quickly pulled out a map from her pouch and examined it closely. The more she looked, the more excited she became. Kenta, unable to resist, leaned in for a look too. Before long, his expression also changed. Kei watched their reactions, a chill running down his spine. Wait a second, is this really that easy to figure out? He rubbed his chin in thought, curious to see what the two of them had deduced. It's Kannabi Bridge, isn't it? Ayaka said excitedly. It has to be. Looking at the route, that has to be their objective. I agree. Kenta wore his usual harmless smile, though his tone carried a sharpness to it. If the IWA shinobi want to invade us, they'd have to go through the land of grass. There are a lot of hidden supply routes between grass and fire, but the most critical logistics line, the one that connects the land of Earth to the front, is through Kannabi Bridge. Which makes it the perfect strategic target. Ayaka stood up, grinning. If we destroy the bridge, we cut off the connection between the land of Earth and the grass country. And since Earth is also at war with the land of lightning, their forces in grass would be completely isolated. Whether we wipe them out or capture some of them alive, it would force Iwagakure into a ceasefire, and give Konoha a strong bargaining position in post-war negotiations. In other words, Kenta added confidently, this war could end with this mission. Kei scratched his nose, inwardly impressed. These two weren't just clever, they were thinking in terms of diplomacy and strategy, not just battle tactics. Is this what they call Hokage-level thinking? It wasn't just about clans or villages. The Hokage mindset involved a bigger picture, broad thinking, long-term consequences, and inclusive vision. Kei had this perspective thanks to his past life as an adult. But the fact that these two, basically still kids, were also thinking on this level, that made Kei wary. Could they be transmigrators too? Kei narrowed his eyes. But after thinking it over, he shook the idea off. No way. If they were, then they'd be incredibly unlucky, to not only reincarnate into war-torn Konoha but also end up on a team with him. If they really were transmigrators, he'd have to eliminate them. So the mission is to destroy Kannabi Bridge, Ayaka said, face serious now. That explains why so many squads were sent out to act as cover rather than engaging on the front lines. IWA must have sensed something, so they're trying to intercept us to protect their logistics line. Which means, our mission is way more dangerous than we thought, Kenta said grimly. We could all die here. Every last one of us. So that's why you decided to bring along those prisoners? Ayaka asked, her eyes narrowing as she studied Kei. The more people we have, the more chaos we can create. The more distracted the enemy gets, the safer we'll be, and the better our chances of success. You really are something else, all that's just your guess, Kei replied calmly. Would you like me to help you forget it? He didn't confirm or deny anything. Instead, he gave them a subtle warning, think carefully about what happened to Yamanaka Masato's team. Sure enough, both Ayaka and Kenta fell silent at his words. Some things are better left unsaid. In fact, knowing too much can be more dangerous than ignorance. Sometimes, it's safer to pretend you don't know anything at all. Now that they understood the real stakes, they stopped asking questions, like why Kei insisted on rescuing those prisoners in the first place. Sure, having more people would create more chaos. But wouldn't that also increase the risk of detection? Were they just supposed to hide in the back forever? Still, since Kei was the one who first uncovered this strategy, they figured he had his reasons. He was the team leader, after all, and they only had one goal, survival. Even so, they weren't about to let their guard down. Kei had been through multiple teams and come out alive every time, leaving a trail of dead comrades behind him. If we're not careful, we might be next. No one wanted to become someone else's stepping stone, or their shield. What they didn't know was that the whole rescue the prisoners thing was just a random idea Kei had come up with. A long-term investment, nothing more. If nothing unexpected had happened, he would have stuck to his original plan, use the Byakugan to find a hidden spot, ambush small IWA squads from the shadows, and then fake some injuries to make it look like they'd been through hell, just in time to head home once Kannabi Bridge was destroyed. That outcome might not be glamorous, but it was still better than being stuck cleaning up scraps at the edge of the battlefield. Kei glanced toward the cave and muttered to himself, gotta be careful. Once we've saved enough of them, I'll send them charging forward. I'll be hiding safely in the back. Over the next few days, Uchiha Kei continued executing his newly devised plan, taking out scattered IWA shinobi patrols while rescuing Konoha prisoners who were relatively easier to extract. It had to be said, Byakugan was extremely useful in this kind of mission. With Hyuga Ayaka's abilities, they were able to avoid more heavily guarded enemy patrols and repeatedly ambush smaller squads with precision. By now, their team had grown to nearly 20 people. But Kei wasn't entirely satisfied. Of the group, only 2 were jonin, and the rest were mainly chunin. In this era, genin usually fell into one of 2 categories, those worth nurturing, and cannon fodder. Those worth training naturally had guardians or mentors and weren't sent to the most dangerous missions. And the fodder, did they even count as people? No intelligence, weak skills, most of them died to random area of effect jutsu or stray attacks. They were essentially just bodies to fill ranks, and maybe, if luck favored them, land a final blow here or there. Frankly, Kei's squad weren't much different, they were just bigger cannon fodder. He knew that well enough. Laughing at weaker comrades when you're barely better yourself wasn't worth the effort. At least Kei was self-aware. As for why jonin were so rare among the rescued. Simple, they were strong and skilled in battlefield adaptation. Unless overwhelmed by multiple enemies or caught in an ambush, they were tough to take down or capture. This wasn't stealth warfare, this was the front lines. In a sneak attack, you capitalized on surprise. But on the front lines, shinobi were prepared. While accidents happened, being surrounded by allies meant someone might save you at the last second. A focused jonin was deadly, and much harder to capture. Most of them either escaped or died in battle. The few that got caught. Pure bad luck. That's why there were so few among the prisoners. Chunin, on the other hand, were the main harvest. It was tragic. Still, even among the rescued, many were hesitant. They figured this had nothing to do with them anymore, they just wanted to return to Konoha's rear guard. After all, not everyone was ready to throw their life away. Thankfully, Yamanaka Masato, one of the jonin Kei rescued, stepped in. He helped keep these nin in line. With the Yamanaka clan name and Uchiha Kei's surname backing him, the others reluctantly agreed to keep going. But my experiments are starting to lag, Kei muttered to himself one night. Every evening, he carved out time to review his progress and test small experiments, subtly and carefully. He knew the evolution path of the Sharingan, but breaking through the current barrier was proving difficult. His spiritual energy was strong, no doubt, but it still wasn't enough to cross that invisible threshold. Lately, he had started to feel the presence of a wall, thick and impenetrable. No matter how he pushed his mental strength against it, it wouldn't budge. It was a bittersweet realization, he was glad to have found the checkpoint, but frustrated he couldn't cross it. Maybe the stimulus just isn't strong enough, he thought. But what could truly stimulate me? I've grown numb to death, and I don't really have any emotional attachments. The famous, kill your closest, trope for unlocking the Mangekyo Sharingan was essentially about destroying a person's emotional anchor, triggering a devastating psychological collapse that ignited unimaginable mental power. But it wasn't always about literal murder, look at Sasuke. He killed Itachi and didn't awaken the Mangekyo. Only after Obito twisted his worldview and plunged him into guilt, hate, and emotional turmoil, that was when his eyes evolved. Yep, the Uchiha clan's full of nutcases, Kei couldn't help but think sarcastically. Well, except me. I'm definitely not one of them. Since the environment made documentation and deeper experimentation impossible, Kei eventually shelved his attempts for now. There was still a mission to complete. The deeper they moved into enemy territory, the heavier the pressure became. They were now far behind the IWA lines, where enemy patrols were everywhere. One misstep, and none of them would make it out alive. At sunrise, the team set out again. They kept standard squad formations, small teams with separate responsibilities. That way, if one unit was discovered, they could deal with it independently. In enemy territory, fewer people actually increased survival chances. From a high tree branch, Kei silently observed an enemy camp ahead. He signaled to the group behind him. It was another prisoner holding sight, they had been targeting these relentlessly. But luck wasn't on their side today. According to Hyuga Ayaka's Byakugan, there were too many shinobi in this one. Clearly, their repeated strikes had finally drawn Iwa's attention. They had tightened security and increased their interrogation efforts. That's the fourth body, Ayaka whispered, her voice cold. There were 7 captives. Now only 3 remain. Yamanaka-senpai wants us to prepare. If we can save them, we save them. If not, we create a diversion and scatter. Typical Jonin, always following the Hokage's ideals, Kei muttered under his breath. Fine. Their lives are in fate's hands now. Wait until the others move before engaging. We need a clear escape route. Don't need you telling me that, Ayaka responded coolly. Imai Kenta just nodded quietly behind them, the picture of an obedient subordinate. But just as they were about to act, a messenger hawk suddenly soared overhead. What? What is going on? Watching the Iwa Nin leaving the camp one after another, Uchiha Kei was utterly confused. Just moments ago, as they were about to make a move, a messenger hawk suddenly flew in. These birds were commonly used for delivering information, so that wasn't the odd part. But what happened next left Kei baffled. The more powerful Iwa Nin suddenly gathered together, swiftly executed the last 3 Konoha prisoners, and then left the camp without a word. Kei wasn't the only one stunned. Yamanaka Masato looked just as bewildered. Once the Iwa Nin were all gone, the remaining Konoha ninjas cautiously crept out and gathered together. Masato quickly sent a few of them to check on the fallen comrades, while the rest assembled to decide their next move. This abrupt evacuation was suspicious, and no one felt at ease about it. Ayaka, can you use your Byakugan to see what those Iwa Nin are up to? Masato turned to the lone Hyuga member among them. I can try, Hyuga Ayaka nodded, but added, if they're too far away, I won't be able to see them clearly. My range is still limited. That's fine. We can tail them for a bit, a jonin named Kajishima Kosuka spoke up. If they're heading back to their base, we might get the chance to sabotage something and draw their attention. That would take the pressure off Minato's squad. Kei's face twitched at that. He couldn't help but regret saving this guy earlier. Another one infected by the so-called will of fire. Do you even know where the will of fire comes from? Do you know who said it first? This idiot probably didn't know a damn thing, and yet here he was, spouting nonsense and trying to drag everyone to their deaths. Kei had no intention of throwing his life away. He quietly decided that if things went south, he'd break off and pursue his own agenda. Don't be reckless, Kosuka. Masato clearly didn't like the plan either. Let's follow them first and decide once we understand the situation. Rushing in will only get us killed. Don't waste the chance Kei gave us by rescuing us. I didn't save you out of kindness, I just needed more meat shields, okay? Kei kept a calm expression, but he rolled his eyes hard on the inside. Still, he had no choice but to follow the others who were already on the move. Authority was a strange thing. If Kei were a jonin, he could easily make decisions based on his Uchiha status alone. But being just a chunin meant one thing: his Sharingan would have to be exposed. There was no way to hide a 3-tomo Sharingan. And while revealing it could bring benefits, even getting him off the front lines, Kei was no fool. He knew the higher-ups of Konoha weren't fond of the Uchiha clan. They hadn't even given the Uchiha real chances during the war. And not long after peace returned, the whole clan was wiped out. Sure, the Nine-Tails incident may have been the spark, but the execution was too clean and coordinated for it not to be premeditated. As an Uchiha, Kei had no choice but to view everything with suspicion and caution. The Uchiha massacre hung over him like a sword. He even believed Uchiha Fugaku might have had a chance to save the clan. After all, the man was crafty. He kept his Mangekyo hidden until death. If he had tried to make a last stand, maybe the Uchiha could have survived. But perhaps Fugaku was just too disappointed in the clan. Or maybe his love for his sons outweighed his loyalty to the Uchiha. And then, like everyone else, he went mad. And that was that. As they continued tailing the IWA Nin, it became increasingly clear they were in a hurry. They were leaving too many tracks behind, something no competent ninja should do. Even Masato began to wonder if they were being deliberately lured into a trap. But after nearly 10 minutes of tracking, Hyuga Ayaka suddenly spoke up. "I think I found their destination," she said, frowning. "There's been a major cave-in. I can see a few people there. One of them is Kakashi." "Kakashi?" Kei blinked in surprise. "Are you sure? What's going on?" Everyone, including the senior jonin like Masato, was visibly stunned. Kakashi was a member of Minato's squad, the very squad their mission was supposed to support. If they had been discovered and ambushed, then everything their own team had done was pointless. But Kei's reaction was different. He knew what was happening. If he was right, Uchiha Obito had just been crushed by rocks. The eye transplant might have already taken place. And if that was true, Kakashi was about to go on a rampage, albeit with a borrowed eye. He'd exhaust himself and pass out soon after. That would be when Minato would arrive for the rescue. It might look dangerous, but Kei knew they were actually safe. With that in mind, his brain kicked into scheming mode again. "Where's Minato-sama?" Masato asked, snapping Kei out of his thoughts. "I don't see him," Ayaka replied calmly. But both Kei and Imai Kenta noticed the barely restrained excitement in her voice. Of course she was excited. If the mission-critical team was wiped out, they'd get to withdraw immediately. Sure, the war would drag on, but at least they'd live. "No way!" Kajishima Kosuka suddenly shouted. "We have to help them. They're the key to the mission, we can't let everyone's sacrifice be in vain." For a moment, Kei thought this guy was kind of adorable, funny how just minutes ago, he regretted saving him. But he wasn't wrong. If they wanted to survive, getting close to Minato was the safest bet, at least for now. Kei stopped hesitating. Rather than chasing the IWA Nin, it made more sense to head toward Minato's position. "Here's the plan," Kei finally spoke. "You guys intercept the IWA Nin. I'll take my squad and rescue Kakashi's team." "You?" Masato blinked in surprise. "Yes. Once they're safe, Ayaka can help them escape with her Byakugan. Then we'll rendezvous with you. Our squad is best suited for this." Masato thought it over and then nodded. "All right. We'll leave it to you." The plan was set. Yamanaka Masato would lead the main unit to intercept the IWA Nin, while Uchiha Kei, accompanied by Hyuga Ayaka and Imai Kenta, would break away to rescue Kakashi. Still, Kei noticed a flicker of hesitation in both Ayaka and Kenta. They clearly had opinions about his decision, but neither voiced them outright. Understandable. People like them would never trust someone like Kei. Same type of people, after all. But even with their doubts, they couldn't ignore his judgment. From the moment this mission began, Kei had seen through the real objective. That kind of insight was the difference between life and death out here. It didn't take long before they caught up to the enemy. Under Yamanaka Masato's command, the Konoha shinobi launched their assault on the IWA Nin. The IWA Nin, though rushed and seemingly careless, hadn't completely dropped their guard. They lost one or two in the ambush, but their counterattack came hard and fast. In an instant, the battlefield was engulfed in chaos. Kei made his move immediately. Slipping past the front lines, he darted toward Kakashi's location at full speed. Why this mission? Ayaka broke the silence once they were far enough from the battle. Kakashi's situation is bad, really bad. Is that so? How many IWA Nin are headed their way? Kei didn't answer her directly, instead throwing back a question of his own. More than 10, almost 20. And Uchiha Obito's been buried under rubble. He's not dead yet, but his life force is fading fast. That leaves just Kakashi and Rin. Still no word on Namikaze-senpai. Perfect. Let's pick up the pace, Kei replied, accelerating. Ayaka and Kenta were stunned. Was this guy really trying to save them? Did he not hear how many enemies were over there? Truth was, they were all stuck in the same boat. Even if they hated each other's guts and had almost come to blows before, the information they shared made them inseparable. If one of them died, the rest would be pulled into an investigation, and possibly worse. We should be hiding, Ayaka said sharply. We're all in this mess together. If one of us goes down, we're all screwed. I agree. We should be more cautious, Captain, Kenta added. Idiots, Kei snorted. Remember what the Cloud Nin said about Namikaze on the battlefield? And what's his signature jutsu again? Ayaka paused. You think he went to reinforce the main front? Flying Thunder God technique. You think distance is an issue for a man like him? Kei didn't need to say much more. He remembered during the Fourth Great War how the second Hokage's squad, even with an incomplete version of the technique, could teleport the Kage. And later, Minato would move something as massive as the Ninetails outside of the village in a flash. So yeah, range wasn't a problem. If all went well, Minato would be back any second. You're gambling, Ayaka said after thinking it through. You don't even know the actual state of the battlefield. I am, Kei admitted. I'm also betting on whether Namikaze Minato truly cares about his students. Don't forget, Obito's an Uchiha, and Kakashi's a Hatake. But the White Fang is gone. And Obito doesn't even have a Sharingan, like you. Ayaka's words trailed off. Her expression changed instantly. Wait, no way, her Byakugan flared. In Kakashi's left eye, she could now see unfamiliar chakra. It clearly didn't belong to him. Obito awakened the Sharingan, no, why was it in Kakashi's eye, and that kunai in his hand? It was no ordinary weapon. It had Minato's marking on it. I see what you're getting at, Ayaka said quietly. Kakashi has Namikaze-senpai's marker. If he channels chakra into it, Minato will sense it and come. But, how did you know Obito would awaken his Sharingan? I'm an Uchiha too, remember? Kei scoffed. Sharingan doesn't awaken through love and sunshine. It's pain and loss. Even the Hokage knows that. Why wouldn't I? And yet you still haven't awakened yours. Ayaka narrowed her eyes. Strange. Yeah, Captain. If you had it, we'd be doing way better, Kenta chimed in. Shut up. Kei didn't bother explaining himself. What was he supposed to say? That he'd awakened it long ago but was too scared to use it. Ayaka and Kenta were smart, but they didn't understand the disease festering between the Uchiha clan and Konoha. What would they think if he told them that in a few years, there would only be one Uchiha left, Uchiha Sasuke? They'd probably think he'd lost his damn mind. The team continued moving in silence. Ayaka fed Kei constant intel ahead, keeping them clear of ambushes. But as they drew closer, all of them could hear the unmistakable crackle of lightning in the distance. That sound, Kei didn't need confirmation. It was Chidori. Kakashi was fighting for his life. He signaled to the others, and they drew their weapons without hesitation. If they were going to pull this off, it had to be clean. Hit hard, stay alive, and buy enough time either for Minato to arrive or to get everyone out. Though frankly, the second option was a death sentence. Kei had only mentioned it to Masato to sound cooperative. Let's wrap this up quick, Kei muttered to himself. And if Madara ever drags me into his hellhole, I swear, I'm yanking out his oxygen tube. While Uchiha Kei was lost in thought and preparing for battle, Kakashi was feeling utterly exhausted. The strain from using the Sharingan combined with the consumption of Chidori had nearly depleted all his chakra. But at this moment, rest was not an option, nor did Kakashi intend to rest. Crushing guilt gnawed at him, plunging his heart into darkness. His desire for death loomed large, growing ever stronger. Still, he hadn't forgotten his promise. For the sake of protecting Rin Noera, and to honor the memory of the deceased, Uchiha Obito, Kakashi decided to risk everything in one final stand. Chakra surged into his right hand, and the sharp chirping sound of Chidori pierced the battlefield. In his left, he tightly gripped a kunai gifted to him by his teacher, Minato Namikaze, channeling a small stream of chakra into it. As his chakra peaked and the Iwa Nin launched their assault, Kakashi, who had long entered a do-or-die mindset, charged straight into the fray without hesitation. At that exact moment, Uchiha Kei and his team arrived at the edge of the battlefield. "This is brutal," Kei muttered, his mouth twitching at the sight of Kakashi fighting with the clear intention to trade his life for one of the enemies. No doubt, Kakashi was fierce, unbelievably so. And Lady Luck seemed to favor him today. Though he had taken hits from the Iwa Nin, none of them were fatal. Kei also noticed something odd. The Iwa Nin didn't seem intent on killing Kakashi. It looked like they were trying to capture him alive. After all, Kakashi was a genius, his name known across the battlefield. Capturing him alive would yield a wealth of intel. What do we do now? Hyuga Ayaka frowned slightly as she whispered, "There are a lot of enemies, and while they're not weak, it looks like they've been holding back. If they wanted Kakashi dead, he'd be dead already. I doubt their restraint will last much longer. Should we move to cover Rin?" Imai Kenta added nervously. "She's in a dangerous spot right now, you two go protect Rin," Kei decided after a moment's thought. "Don't let the enemy near her. I'll go back up Kakashi." "You really think Captain Minato will show up in time?" Ayaka asked with a raised eyebrow, though Kei's expression told her she was wasting her breath. Indeed, she was. Kei didn't even respond, he'd already leapt into action. Ayaka and Kenta exchanged a glance before reluctantly following orders. All they could do now was hope that Minato Namikaze would truly arrive in time. Otherwise, they'd be in deep trouble. Kakashi, meanwhile, had forced one Iwa Nin up against a tree using his kunai, completely ignoring the attacks closing in behind him. With Chidori chirping furiously in his right hand, he thrust it toward the enemy's chest. Suddenly, a vicious glint flashed across his opponent's face. In a desperate counter, the enemy drew his own kunai and lunged toward Kakashi, ready to go down with him. But Kakashi remained calm. Or rather, he barely seemed to care. With Obito's Sharingan enhancing his dynamic vision, and his control reaching new heights, Kakashi shifted slightly mid-charge, just enough to dodge the fatal blow. In the next instant, Chidori pierced his foe's chest clean through, scattering blood and flesh with terrifying force. A one-hit kill. However, that left Kakashi vulnerable. Iwa Nin swarmed in behind him, still clearly focused on capturing him alive. The worst part was Kakashi's chakra, he was nearly empty. Is this the end? Kakashi sighed internally. He was so tired. Bone-deep exhaustion was consuming him. He wanted nothing more than to collapse. But thoughts of Obito, of Rin still behind him, forced him to stay on his feet. The fight wasn't over. Not while he still drew breath. Ripping his hand from the enemy's corpse, Kakashi turned around, only to freeze in surprise. A shadow had appeared behind the Iwa Nin. In the blink of an eye, a kunai slashed across one enemy's throat, clean, efficient, deadly. Then the figure hurled the same kunai, pinning another Iwa Nin just as he approached Kakashi. The newcomer landed in front of Kakashi. Recognizing the insignia on his comrade's uniform, Kakashi exhaled in relief, only for his guilt to spike even harder. "You alright?" Uchiha Kei asked as he glanced back at Kakashi. "Where's Minato-sama?" "He went to reinforce the front lines," Kakashi answered, his voice heavy. "You guys should get out of here. I'll hold them off. Just make sure Rin gets out safely." "What about your mission?" Kei frowned. "Never mind. My teammates are already helping Rin. You rest, regain your strength. We're breaking through. We can't stay here." Kei didn't give Kakashi any time to argue. In truth, he had more to say, he just didn't have the chance. The Iwa Nin, recovering from their initial shock, regrouped and launched another offensive. Kei took a deep breath. He had no idea how long he could hold out, or even how long Kakashi had managed to in the original timeline before Minato's arrival. But in enemy territory, it was worth the risk to buy time and create a safe escape route. Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. Kei didn't hesitate. Forming the hand signs, he released a blazing sphere of flame toward the enemy. There were too many of them. He might not win, but that wasn't the point. Winning was about power. Fighting was about resolve. Kei may not always show the best attitude, but in this moment, he was dead serious. Still, the moment he attacked, he regretted it. As it turned out, the Iwa Nin hit by the great fireball burst into smoke and vanished. Clones. Or shadow clones. Kei hadn't activated his Sharingan, but that didn't mean he was helpless. Feigning panic, Kei seemed about to use the substitution jutsu, just as a kunai struck him square in the back. His body crumbled into dust. A classic substitution jutsu, Kei had no shortage of survival tricks up his sleeve. In fact, he was a bit of an expert when it came to battlefield survival. His true form appeared behind the attacking Iwa Nin, driving a kunai deep into the man's back, mirroring the move used against him seconds earlier. But the sensation wasn't right. Something felt off. And before he could react, more Iwa Nin closed in. Without hesitation, Kei vanished in another puff of smoke, another substitution jutsu. The Iwa Nin in front of Uchiha Kei suddenly burst into smoke. It was clearly a shadow clone. The shadow clone technique, originally created by Konoha's second Hokage, had long since become a common trick in the shinobi world. It's likely that some poor spy got captured, and the technique was extracted straight from their mind. Regardless of how it spread, the reality was this: any capable shinobi, regardless of their village, had mastered this once exclusive jutsu. Kei had just used a substitution jutsu, and now his substitute was split clean in half, turning into a pair of broken tree branches. A cold bead of sweat slid down his forehead. These guys are seriously annoying, Kei thought grimly. Even with his quick reflexes, he hadn't emerged unscathed. Blood dripped from a cut on his left shoulder. But now wasn't the time to worry about minor injuries. Just the onslaught from that jonin alone, like a relentless storm, had Kei on the defensive, without even a second to form seals for ninjutsu. In the manga, even a genin like Rock Lee could give a jonin a run for their money, hell, sometimes even defeat them in a flash. But here Kei was, fighting at a level beyond Chunin without using his Sharingan, and yet he was being utterly overwhelmed by a nameless Iwa Nin. If he slipped up even once, he'd be flanked and killed like a nobody. Why is real life so unfair? And with Kei trying so hard not to expose his Sharingan, it was making things all the more difficult. Without a Mangekyo, he had no true fallback option. The last thing he wanted was to be placed under Konoha's microscope. Unless he awakened Mangekyo. Then maybe, just maybe, he'd consider revealing the existence of his Sharingan. He quickly glanced over to check on Rin Nohara's side of the fight. That brought a bit of relief. Despite being generally unreliable, Hyuga Ayaka and Imai Kenta had actually followed his orders. Their arrival had eased some of the pressure on Kei. Many Iwa Nin had turned to engage them instead. This battle was far tougher than he anticipated. It wasn't that these Iwa Nin were invincible, though they were powerful, but facing multiple opponents in sync was wearing him down fast. Without using the Sharingan, Kei had no choice but to rely on basic taijutsu and battlefield instincts. Thankfully, Minato Namikaze should be arriving soon, and with his speed, he'd be here in a flash. At the same time, Kakashi seemed to have recovered a bit. With Kei drawing most of the attention and attacks, Kakashi had earned a few precious minutes of rest. It wasn't enough to restore much chakra, but it helped him stabilize his breathing and clear his mind. Soon, Kakashi was back in the fray, launching himself into battle again. That gave Kei a few moments of respite. Fighting this many Iwa nin at once was taking a real toll. Move faster, Kei murmured, back to back with Kakashi. We're not in great shape. Don't get stuck here, we've got reinforcements just a few kilometers out. We push through, understood? Got it, Kakashi replied under his breath. Which unit are you from, anyway? Why are you even here? I'll explain later, Kei answered, scanning the battlefield. Right side. Hyuga Ayaka is there. We regroup and break through together. Understood, Kakashi replied crisply. Now wasn't the time for questions. As soon as Kakashi finished speaking, Kei dashed toward an Iwa nin, clashing blades once more. Kakashi was slower to react, his body still worn and aching, but he didn't let that stop him. Despite being covered in injuries, he fought with brutal tenacity. He even managed to assist Kei with a well-timed sneak attack, allowing Kei to slash the enemy's throat cleanly. Unfortunately, the Iwa nin were far from broken. Their will to fight was terrifying. Do they run on something like will of stone or whatever? Kei wondered, annoyed. He noticed something else disturbing. The Iwa nin had started to fight more aggressively, no longer holding back. They must have agreed on some sort of silent cue, deciding to go all out. Kei was getting overwhelmed fast, but Kakashi was in even worse shape. His limbs were growing heavy, his vision beginning to blur. Blood loss was taking its toll, and his strength was fading quickly. Damn it, these guys are locking us down tight. Kei cursed inwardly. Then he spotted an Iwa nin sneaking up on Kakashi from behind. His mind raced. Dodging an incoming strike, Kei quickly pulled out a handful of smoke bombs and hurled them toward Kakashi's position. A dense cloud exploded into the air. Kei vanished with a body flicker, reappearing in the smoke just in time. Facing the Iwa nin who had aimed for Kakashi, Kei's eyes snapped open, Sharingan activated. Even though his opponent was moving at lightning speed, in Kei's Sharingan-enhanced vision, it looked like the man was moving through molasses. With a slight twist of his body, Kei dodged, then shoved Kakashi out of the way. The two narrowly avoided the enemy's deadly strike. In that split second, Kei seized the Iwa nin's wrist, and just as swiftly, deactivated his Sharingan. Kakashi hit the ground hard from the push, but quickly scrambled to his feet. His right eye couldn't pierce the smoke, but his Sharingan left eye could see clearly. And what he saw made his jaw drop. Kei, without anyone noticing, had transformed into the Iwa nin, then sent the real enemy flying with a solid kick. A second later, Kei, now disguised as the Iwa nin, retreated toward two nearby enemies, blending in with perfect mimicry. Kakashi was stunned. Wait, you can use transformation jutsu like that? But Kei wasn't about to stop and explain. The Iwa nin he had kicked hadn't realized his allies were behind him. He turned his head for just a moment and was immediately impaled through the heart by a kunai. His body returned to normal as he fell, mouth slightly agape, trying to speak, only to die before uttering a word. Kei wasted no time. While the two Iwa nin thought their comrade was returning, he whipped out two kunai and plunged them into their chests. There was no resistance. They hadn't suspected a thing. Too bad Kei couldn't see their faces. He imagined they must have looked absolutely stunned. But before he could feel any satisfaction, Kei's expression stiffened. A blinding flash of yellow appeared before him. A kunai, slicing through the air with deadly precision, slashed straight toward his throat. Shit! Kei froze. I totally screwed up. I died. Uchiha Kei felt a splitting headache. But as soon as he sensed the return of his sense of touch, he immediately realized one thing: he wasn't dead. Relieved, Kei exhaled. If he had truly died just now, he might have gone down in history as the most pathetic transmigrator ever. Still, something wasn't quite right. his eyes ached, and his body felt sore all over. "You're awake." A gentle voice reached Kei's ears. It carried a subtle undertone of guilt. Lifting his heavy head slightly, Kei shuddered involuntarily the moment he saw the speaker. After all, it was this very person who had just given him a near-death experience. Yet now, that man's expression was calm and friendly, radiating a natural warmth that made him likable without effort. It was Minato Namikaze. "Yeah." Kei rubbed his throbbing temples and glanced around. "Looks like we're safe now." "Yes. I'm truly sorry about what happened earlier." Minato scratched his blonde hair, a little awkwardly. "Things were chaotic at the time, and I didn't have the luxury to make distinctions." "Forget it. It was just bad timing." Kei shook his head. He didn't want to linger on it. Sometimes, when luck runs out, even drinking water could make you choke. And Kei had clearly drawn the short straw this time. He turned to look at Kakashi, who was still unconscious. Rin, on the other hand, had woken up and stood nearby, quietly gazing at the stars. A little further away, Yamanaka Masato was organizing the surviving Konoha shinobi, setting up a watch and tending to the wounded. Kei noticed that among the group he had helped save, only about 10 shinobi remained, not counting his own squad. This was a heavy loss, Kei muttered under his breath. Indeed. But thankfully, all the Iwa Nin were eliminated. "We haven't been exposed." Minato nodded, though his expression turned serious as he looked at Kei. "Thank you for saving them. And for saving Kakashi. If it weren't for you, their fate. I only did what I had to in order to complete the mission." Kei cut him off, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. He waved his hand dismissively. "Let's not talk about that. I was just doing my job." "I understand." Minato gave Kei a thoughtful look, then smiled. "Still, I'll make sure to report your contributions. There won't be any issues. And congratulations, Kei, you've finally awakened your Sharingan." Hearing Minato call him by name with that level of familiarity, Kei finally relaxed a little. Whatever his true motives were, it was good enough if Minato, the future fourth Hokage, saw what he wanted him to see. That, in itself, was a win. As for the Sharingan, Kei simply smiled and didn't say anything. This whole ordeal had given him much more than he had expected. The weight on his shoulders felt noticeably lighter now. It was, without a doubt, an unexpected but massive gain. As Kakashi began to stir, Kei quietly excused himself. The master and student likely had things to talk about, and Kei had no intention of sticking around for a conversation about Kakashi's new Sharingan. Neither he nor Minato brought it up, choosing to silently ignore the elephant in the room, for now. Whatever would happen next, they'd leave it to the higher-ups in the village to handle. After all, neither of them held much sway. "You're alive." When Kei finally found Ayaka and Kenta, Ayaka greeted him in her usual, unfriendly tone. "I thought for sure you were done for." As expected of our captain, Kenta smiled, sounding genuinely impressed. To take down so many Iwa Nin and survive a clash with the Yellow Flash. Unreal. "You two probably hoped I was dead," Kei replied as he casually sat down. "That way, your mission would be over." "Wait, no, there were still plenty of other ninja around. You wouldn't have escaped either. But sorry to disappoint, I'm very much alive." "Humph," Ayaka snorted, though her expression quickly changed as she frowned. "Wait, did you awaken your Sharingan? Otherwise, there's no way you could have dodged an attack from Minato-senpai." Kenta also looked at Kei, puzzled. By now, Kei didn't see a reason to hide it. He slowly closed his eyes, and when they opened again, they glowed crimson, his fully awakened Sharingan spinning gently with 3 tomo in each eye. Looking back, Kei realized he had definitely gone overboard. To pull such a risky stunt knowing Minato might appear at any moment. That was borderline suicidal. But in the heat of battle, Kei didn't have time to think. His luck just happened to suck. Of all times, Minato had to return right then. As the kunai rapidly closed in, Kei bit down hard. In that life-or-death moment, he immediately dropped his transformation jutsu and released his Sharingan. There was no room for secrecy anymore. Life was on the line. At the very least, the Sharingan allowed him to see Minato's movements. But to his dismay, he encountered the same problem Sasuke Uchiha would face years later. He could see the attack, but his body simply couldn't react in time. Minato was just too fast. He blinked in with Flying Thunder God, followed instantly by a Shunshin, closing the distance in a flash. His kunai was aimed with terrifying precision and grace. It was a level of seamless execution Kei couldn't even imagine achieving. As the kunai neared his throat, Kei was filled with dread. Is this it? Is this where I die? No. I refuse. He had survived so many battles. Why die now, at the hands of an ally, no less? Fueled by a surge of fear and defiance, Kei made a bold move. If I'm dying here, I'm taking the future fourth Hokage with me. With a twist of his wrist, he reversed the grip on his kunai and thrust it with all his might toward Minato's chest. And then, time seemed to freeze. Minato hung motionless in mid-air, utterly still. His expression was calm, focused. Everything else, everyone else, had frozen too. Except for Kei. And in that moment, his Sharingan began to change. The three tomo spun rapidly, merging together into a new shape. A shimmering, rotating Mangekyo slowly formed in his eyes. In a strange twist of fate, Uchiha Kei found a blessing in disguise. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan in such a way. His Mangekyo pattern was something entirely unseen before, shaped like a triangular diamond, distinct and unique. Kei had always wondered what kind of emotional trigger would finally allow him to break through that invisible wall, that threshold standing between him and the next level. What would it take to truly awaken his eyes? In this world, Kei did have family. But the truth was, he had never formed any deep emotional ties with them. Rebuilding bonds as a reincarnated soul, especially one that came from a different, more mature world, was far easier said than done. For Kei, it simply never happened. He didn't really have any close friends either. After all, he entered the ninja academy at 5, too mature and distant to connect with a bunch of kids. By the time he was 7, he was graduated and sent straight to the battlefield. Even if he wanted to form meaningful connections, the war robbed him of the chance. The battlefield did leave an impact on Kei. Whether it was seeing comrades die or watching enemies fall, he was shaken at first, deeply unsettled. But that discomfort faded quickly. Over time, Kei learned to suppress those feelings, to face death with a calm, indifferent demeanor. A boy with almost no bonds, who could remain emotionally detached even amidst death, had managed to evolve his Sharingan to 3 tomo through sheer will and illusion-based training. That alone was impressive. But the lack of bonds came with a price. It meant Kei hit a ceiling. Despite awakening the 3 tomo Sharingan at 10 years old, by the age of 13 he'd barely progressed. He had achieved something. Yet remained stuck behind that wall. Until now. Faced with a life-or-death threat from Minato Namikaze, Kei's usually calm heart was thrown into chaos. Panic, resistance, the overwhelming will to survive, it all surged within him. And somehow, that primal desire not to die triggered the awakening of the very power he had longed for, the Mangekyo Sharingan. From the moment Kei arrived in this world and learned of his Uchiha lineage, he'd always been waiting and planning for this moment. Now, at long last, it had bloomed. Honestly, it's kind of embarrassing. Everyone else unlocks their Mangekyo by killing someone they love. I awakened mine because I didn't want to die. How pathetic. After briefly showing his 3 tomo Sharingan, instead of the Mangekyo, to Ayaka Hyuga and Imai Kenta, leaving them both in stunned silence, Kei closed his eyes and rubbed his temples, silently brooding. To make matters worse, the abilities of his Mangekyo were odd. No Kamui, no Tsukuyumi, no Amaterasu. Nothing familiar. Just strange, unfamiliar powers. Mangekyo abilities are born from the user's deepest emotions, shaped by what lies in their heart. And Kei, cornered and desperate, had only one thought in his mind: if only I were faster, if only he were slower, if only time could stop, just for a second, so I could dodge, and somehow, that wish was granted. Kei's Mangekyo abilities were time-based. His left eye, Chrono Leap, the ability to speed up time either for himself or an enemy. His right eye, Chrono Drift, the ability to slow time, again targeting himself or others. And when used together, his dual eye technique, Chrono Freeze, the power to pause time entirely. It was terrifying. If that ability worked on anyone, Kei would basically be a walking nuclear weapon. But according to the feedback from his eyes, that was just wishful thinking. Chrono Freeze's effectiveness depended on both Kei's Mangekyo chakra and the strength of the target. The longer time was paused, the more chakra it drained. The stronger the opponent, the higher the energy cost. What a scam, Kei grumbled internally. Unless he had vast chakra reserves, he'd be lucky to freeze time for even a second or two, after which, he'd be completely drained. His recent blackout was proof. He had used Chrono Freeze to stop Minato, dodged the attack, but passed out right after. He didn't even fight back. So for now, the ability felt more like a kamikaze move, a desperate gamble with high risk and limited use. And that wasn't all. His Chrono Leap and Chrono Drift weren't complete either. According to his eyes, the full potential of Chrono Leap would let someone experience their entire life in a fraction of a second, a horrifyingly real simulation that could utterly break a person. Chrono Drift, in its final form, would allow actual time reversal. Unfortunately, neither of them are fully unlocked. And even their current forms are insanely chakra-hungry, Kei sighed. But then a weird thought hit him: why do these abilities feel so familiar? Frowning, he thought hard. And then it hit him. Wait a second. Speed up. Slow down. Pause, that's just a media player. With the completed versions, he could literally rewind and scrub through time like dragging a timeline slider. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, face-palming. All this effort, all this waiting, and he ended up with an overpowered, but battery-draining, player mode Mangekyo. Sure, it was powerful, but right now, completely impractical. Even worse, he knew that awakening the Mangekyo didn't make him invincible. In this world, the Mangekyo was just a higher vantage point, not a final destination. People like the village leaders, even Danzo, had plenty of ways to handle Mangekyo users. Right now, all Kei had earned was a chance, a little more room to survive. But if he acted recklessly, he'd get crushed. Whether it was Danzo, or someone else. He'd be done for. Wait, so that's how you awakened your Sharingan? Ayaka suddenly asked, unsure. And it's already 3 tomo? Something like that, Kei sighed. I don't really know why. I mean, didn't Obito awaken his at 2 tomo or something? Don't tell me, Ayaka said with a strange look. Do all Uchiha need to almost die to awaken their eyes? Is it trauma? Or just extreme survival instincts? Kei's face twitched. What's it to you? So basically, you unlocked it because you were afraid of dying. How laughably cowardly. Shut up. Uchiha Obito's death didn't halt the progress of their mission. The tasks assigned by the village still had to go on, especially one as critical as this. This mission could potentially end the war early, or at the very least, it could halt the entire Third Great Ninja War. Uchiha Kei had already mentally prepared himself for it. Besides, he was the designated alternate for the team assigned to carry it out. In the event of casualties or unexpected events, the third Hokage had authorized Namikaze Minato to recruit replacement members and assign them to complete the mission. It was clear just how seriously the upper ranks of Konoha regarded this operation. Kei never even considered the possibility of backing out. After resting well for the night, he quickly regrouped with his team and got ready to depart. This time, however, he felt far more confident. Now that he had the Mangekyo Sharingan, a truly overwhelming power, he wasn't afraid to reveal his Sharingan anymore. Unlike before, he didn't have to hide in the shadows. Though he still didn't dare use his full abilities, and his understanding of the Mangekyo was practically zero, the sheer presence of such power gave him solid ground to stand on. Would revealing the Sharingan land him on Konoha's blacklist? So what? Worst case scenario, he'd slap a kunai onto his forehead protector. Let's see who gets more nervous then. Still, I can't get cocky. The Mangekyo is just the beginning. I haven't even awakened Susanoo yet, and I'm still unfamiliar with my eye techniques. I need to study this more carefully. Kei remained clear-headed. He didn't let the power get to his head. He wasn't like Itachi Uchiha, who pushed himself regardless of the toll it took. And he certainly wasn't like Sasuke, who could recklessly burn through his eyesight, and just swap in his brother's eyes when needed. Kei had no brother to fall back on. Eternal Mangekyo wasn't even in the picture, at least for now. But he wasn't discouraged either. He'd already taken the hardest step. With this foundation, he could bide his time and prepare for what's to come. After packing up, Kei called Ayaka and Kenta to head over to Namikaze Minato's camp. By now, Minato had clearly become the top commander for all the shinobi in their area. Even senior ninja like Yamanaka Masato had no objections. As soon as everyone gathered, Minato got straight to the point. Here's the situation. We wiped out a large group of IWA Nin in our last skirmish. That's bound to draw their attention. So we need to move faster. Yamanaka-san, I'm assigning you the task of drawing the enemy's focus. Create distractions and buy us some time. Understood, Captain Namikaze. Masato nodded calmly, showing no hesitation or disagreement. Kei-kun, please stay behind. Just as Kei was about to follow Masato's team, Minato suddenly called out to him. I have a new mission for you three. A new mission? Kei blinked in surprise, while Ayaka and Kenta exchanged worried looks. It didn't take a genius to guess, if everyone else was being sent out and their team was being kept behind, it likely meant they were being given a tougher assignment. The three of them started processing the situation rapidly. It didn't take long for their hearts to sink. Minato's team was originally made up of 4 people, but at present, only 3 were left active. With the front line strained, and Minato possessing the Flying Thunder God technique, he could teleport between locations at will. Not making full use of that ability would be wasteful. This also allowed them to present a strategic illusion, make it seem like Minato was stationed solely at the front lines, keeping the IWA Nin from suspecting any moves in their rear. Now, with 1 team member lost, the remaining 3 should have continued the mission. But the circumstances had changed. Kei's team had recently rescued a large number of Konoha shinobi. This drastically reduced the burden on the decoy units tasked with distracting the enemy. And those rescued ninja? They could now serve as reserves. With sufficient manpower, there was no longer a need for Kakashi and Rin to complete the mission alone. This shift allowed Minato to focus on suppressing IWA Nin at the front, while still ensuring the mission behind enemy lines went smoothly. As for why Kei's team was chosen, the reason was obvious. With members from the Uchiha and Hyuga, 2 powerful dojutsu clans, and considerable combat experience, their squad was an ideal choice. Not to mention, Kei was Kakashi's classmate, and Ayaka and Kenta were only a year or 2 older. Close enough in age to communicate easily. That familiarity, along with their eye techniques, made them perfect for the job. The 3 quickly pieced all this together, and for a moment, their expressions subtly shifted. Oddly enough, they felt relieved. All things considered, this mission might be the safest one available. The original decoy squad was now vastly larger, and they had Minato, an overwhelming force, ready to assist at any time. Compared to running around trying to draw enemy fire with no backup, this was definitely the better deal. Sure, it was still dangerous. But at least this time, they had insurance. Ayaka and Kenta glanced at Kei. If he hadn't conveniently awakened his Sharingan at the right time, this opportunity might never have come to them. Of course, there was also the chance their team would have been split up, but that wasn't ideal. Unfamiliar squads thrown together on short notice, that was just a recipe for disaster in a war zone. As expected, Minato spoke up again. I'm assigning you to a top-secret mission. This task is of utmost importance, it could determine the entire outcome of the war. I need to requisition your squad for it. Any objections? None. All three responded in unison. Good. Minato nodded in approval. His tone then turned serious. This mission is highly dangerous. Keikuin, since your team is still intact, I'm assigning you as squad leader. Now, listen carefully while I explain the details. Me, the squad leader. Kei was slightly taken aback but quickly nodded. Understood. I'm listening. Uchiha Obito's death didn't halt the progress of their mission. The tasks assigned by the village still had to go on, especially one as critical as this. This mission could potentially end the war early, or at the very least, it could halt the entire Third Great Ninja War. Uchiha Kei had already mentally prepared himself for it. Besides, he was the designated alternate for the team assigned to carry it out. In the event of casualties or unexpected events, the third Hokage had authorized Namikaze Minato to recruit replacement members and assign them to complete the mission. It was clear just how seriously the upper ranks of Konoha regarded this operation. Kei never even considered the possibility of backing out. After resting well for the night, he quickly regrouped with his team and got ready to depart. This time, however, he felt far more confident. Now that he had the Mangekyo Sharingan, a truly overwhelming power, he wasn't afraid to reveal his Sharingan anymore. Unlike before, he didn't have to hide in the shadows. Though he still didn't dare use his full abilities, and his understanding of the Mangekyo was practically zero, the sheer presence of such power gave him solid ground to stand on. Would revealing the Sharingan land him on Konoha's blacklist? So what? Worst case scenario, he'd slap a kunai onto his forehead protector. Let's see who gets more nervous then. Still, I can't get cocky. The Mangekyo is just the beginning. I haven't even awakened Susanoo yet, and I'm still unfamiliar with my eye techniques. I need to study this more carefully. Kei remained clear-headed. He didn't let the power get to his head. He wasn't like Itachi Uchiha, who pushed himself regardless of the toll it took. And he certainly wasn't like Sasuke, who could recklessly burn through his eyesight, and just swap in his brother's eyes when needed. Kei had no brother to fall back on. Eternal Mangekyo wasn't even in the picture, at least for now. But he wasn't discouraged either. He'd already taken the hardest step. With this foundation, he could bide his time and prepare for what's to come. After packing up, Kei called Ayaka and Kenta to head over to Namikaze Minato's camp. By now, Minato had clearly become the top commander for all the shinobi in their area. Even senior ninja like Yamanaka Masato had no objections. As soon as everyone gathered, Minato got straight to the point. Here's the situation. We wiped out a large group of Iwa Nin in our last skirmish. That's bound to draw their attention. So we need to move faster. Yamanaka-san, I'm assigning you the task of drawing the enemy's focus. Create distractions and buy us some time. Understood, Captain Namikaze. Masato nodded calmly, showing no hesitation or disagreement. Keikuin, please stay behind. Just as Kei was about to follow Masato's team, Minato suddenly called out to him. I have a new mission for you three. A new mission? Kei blinked in surprise, while Ayaka and Kenta exchanged worried looks. It didn't take a genius to guess, if everyone else was being sent out and their team was being kept behind, it likely meant they were being given a tougher assignment. The three of them started processing the situation rapidly. It didn't take long for their hearts to sink. Minato's team was originally made up of 4 people, but at present, only 3 were left active. With the front line strained, and Minato possessing the Flying Thunder God technique, he could teleport between locations at will. Not making full use of that ability would be wasteful. This also allowed them to present a strategic illusion, make it seem like Minato was stationed solely at the front lines, keeping the Iwa Nin from suspecting any moves in their rear. Now, with 1 team member lost, the remaining 3 should have continued the mission. But the circumstances had changed. Kei's team had recently rescued a large number of Konoha shinobi. This drastically reduced the burden on the decoy units tasked with distracting the enemy. And those rescued ninja? They could now serve as reserves. With sufficient manpower, there was no longer a need for Kakashi and Rin to complete the mission alone. This shift allowed Minato to focus on suppressing Iwa Nin at the front, while still ensuring the mission behind enemy lines went smoothly. As for why Kei's team was chosen, the reason was obvious. With members from the Uchiha and Hyuga, 2 powerful dojutsu clans, and considerable combat experience, their squad was an ideal choice. Not to mention, Kei was Kakashi's classmate, and Ayaka and Kenta were only a year or 2 older. Close enough in age to communicate easily. That familiarity, along with their eye techniques, made them perfect for the job. The 3 quickly pieced all this together, and for a moment, their expressions subtly shifted. Oddly enough, they felt relieved. All things considered, this mission might be the safest one available. The original decoy squad was now vastly larger, and they had Minato, an overwhelming force, ready to assist at any time. Compared to running around trying to draw enemy fire with no backup, this was definitely the better deal. Sure, it was still dangerous. But at least this time, they had insurance. Ayaka and Kenta glanced at Kei. If he hadn't conveniently awakened his Sharingan at the right time, this opportunity might never have come to them. Of course, there was also the chance their team would have been split up, but that wasn't ideal. Unfamiliar squads thrown together on short notice, that was just a recipe for disaster in a war zone. As expected, Minato spoke up again, "I'm assigning you to a top-secret mission. This task is of utmost importance, it could determine the entire outcome of the war. I need to requisition your squad for it. Any objections?" None. All 3 responded in unison. Good. Minato nodded in approval. His tone then turned serious. This mission is highly dangerous. Keikuin, since your team is still intact, I'm assigning you as squad leader. Now, listen carefully while I explain the details. Me, the squad leader. Kei was slightly taken aback but quickly nodded. Understood. I'm listening. Sometimes, good fortune arrives without warning, just like when Uchiha Kei first awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. Back then, it had caught him completely off guard. And now, the same could be said of his current situation. Thanks to a series of smart decisions and well-executed plans, Kei not only earned the approval of Minato Namikaze, but also secured a spot on his team. This wasn't just any team, it was the key to survival. Kei vividly remembered that iconic scene from the original story, where Kakashi stood alone in front of the collapsed Kannabi Bridge, his silhouette steeped in loneliness. He also remembered Minato arriving afterward, watching from afar. That moment had left a deep impression on Kei. What that scene told him was crucial. In the end, Minato would personally join the mission, ensuring its success. With the future 4th Hokage as part of the team, Kei felt a sense of safety that far surpassed anything Hyuga Ayaka or Imai Kenta could have imagined. Of course, Minato's presence didn't mean complete safety. They would still encounter plenty of danger and trouble along the way. But now, Kei had been granted temporary command of the team, an invaluable advantage. With this role, he could make decisions that prioritized safety and efficiency, significantly increasing their chances of success. More importantly, even without possessing one of Minato's marked kunai, Kei now had the authority to summon him into action. As a shinobi, Kakashi had no choice but to follow his orders. If he didn't, not even being the White Fang's son or Minato's student would save him from disciplinary action. Why had Kei been given command in the first place? It didn't take long for him to figure it out. Besides Minato's reason of forming a complete team, it was likely a measure to keep Kakashi in check. Despite Minato's guidance, Kakashi's mental state was fragile. He could easily act out or disobey orders. Having Kei, a fellow Uchiha and someone who had saved both Kakashi and Rin, in charge might ease Kakashi's overwhelming sense of guilt and help stabilize him. With that mix of gratitude and Kei's status, Kakashi would be far less likely to resist. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. Kakashi showed no signs of protest when the orders were given. Their mission turned out to be just as Kei had predicted, which made both Hyuga Ayaka and Imai Kenta glance at him in awe. This guy had anticipated everything from the start, orchestrating it all so they would end up in the safest position. It was impressive, and honestly, a little scary. If Kei had known what they were thinking, he might have quipped, "Do you guys know who Demiurge is?" With Kei's team handling infiltration, Minato departed for the front lines, likely believing that his skills were needed more urgently there. Kei took command of the squad without any adjustments. He was already familiar with everyone's capabilities. Kakashi's strength was undeniable. Rin specialized in medical ninjutsu, and although Kei didn't expect her to contribute much offensively, she was essential support. Kei assigned Imai Kenta to protect her. As much as Kei wanted to take that role himself, he knew he'd be needed on the front lines. Kenta's taijutsu and sensory skills made him a solid choice. Still, Kei had a sinking feeling. Once the enemy realized they had a medic, Kenta might actually become the most targeted member of the team. The five of them traveled swiftly through the forest, encountering their fair share of Iwa Nin. Fortunately, thanks to Ayaka's Byakugan, they always spotted the enemy from kilometers away. On top of that, the decoy squads led by Yamanaka Masato had been doing a phenomenal job, drawing attention away from Kei's group. As a result, they were having the smoothest infiltration experience since the mission began. But after a few days, pressure started mounting. Though Iwa didn't have large forces stationed in the rear, Ayaka's Byakugan revealed that nearly every possible route they could take was blocked. Worse still, even the seemingly open paths were riddled with traps. Just one trap, an explosive tag hidden in a book, was enough to wipe them out 1,000 times over. This isn't working. Kei thought silently as he sat in a concealed cave, hiding from patrols. He hadn't expected the enemy's rear defense to be this tight. Maybe our previous assault on the prison camp and the disappearance of a few squads tipped them off. Hyuga Ayaka sat beside him, her voice calm. So what now? While it's true their rear guard isn't large, from their chakra signatures, they're definitely not pushovers. Kei gave her a side eye. Thanks for the useful info, Captain Obvious. If they were pushovers, Konoha would have taken care of them already. They wouldn't be stuck in this mess. With no better option, Kei realized they might have to go with a direct assault, something he had wanted to avoid at all costs. Who knew what had become of the decoy teams by now? They couldn't afford to wait around. Can you tell which unit they belong to? Kei asked, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. You're joking, right? Ayaka shot him a look like he'd grown a second head. You'd be better off capturing one and interrogating them. Aren't you an Uchiha now? Use that Sharingan. Before Kei could respond, Kakashi suddenly spoke up. Captain, I think we should head toward the area with fewer enemies. Kei and Ayaka both frowned as soon as he spoke. Kakashi's face was calm as ever. I know it's likely a trap. If we show ourselves, we might draw out more Iwa Nin. But, then why suggest it? Kei asked, puzzled. Has he lost it? Because I'll go alone, Kakashi said flatly, standing up. I'll use a shadow clone. Just like you guys played decoy before, this time, I'll be the bait. Uchiha Kei frowned. This was actually a pretty good idea. Kakashi's name was well known, and his strength wasn't to be underestimated. Using his chakra to create shadow clones and lure the enemy wasn't a difficult task for him. So, if Kakashi went as the bait and successfully drew Iwanin's attention, they'd likely reinforce the area. With Hyuga Ayaka's assistance, they could exploit a weakness in their defenses and break through the Kannabi Bridge, ideally, before Kakashi was captured or killed. But the risk was immense. This was essentially a suicide mission. The odds of surviving were nearly zero. Kei stared seriously at Kakashi. For a moment, he realized that he truly couldn't compare to him. The kind of mental fortitude Kakashi possessed. Kei didn't have that. At first, Kei hadn't really understood what people in this world meant by capacity or Kiryu. It was something often mentioned in the early stages of Naruto, but rarely brought up later. Now, however, he was starting to get it. It wasn't just about strength. It was spirit. Determination. The sheer will to bear a burden. Take Minato Namikaze, for example, the future fourth Hokage. He sealed the nine tails inside his newborn son. With his intellect, did he not foresee the hardships Naruto would face? Maybe he had no other choice. He and Kushina were dying, and Naruto, as an Uzumaki, had the ideal body for it. But what if it wasn't just necessity? What if it was all part of a plan? One final move before death, if that were true, then sealing the fox inside Naruto wasn't just to protect the village, but also to forge his son's destiny. To leave behind a legacy of survival and strength. It's a bit of a conspiracy theory, but in this world, Kei had grown used to such things. Still, if we're talking about Kiryu, then Itachi Uchiha's capacity was perhaps the most terrifying of all. For the sake of Konoha, he collaborated with the power-hungry Danzo and even with the shadowy Akatsuki, whose allegiance was murky at best. To protect his younger brother and preserve the Uchiha bloodline, he abandoned a clan doomed to fail in their attempted coup. He even killed his parents with his own hands and bore the hatred of an entire village. To ensure Sasuke's growth, he constantly tormented and traumatized his beloved brother, turning him into a vessel of hatred. And in doing so, gave Sasuke the resolve to one day kill him and awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. He watched, emotionless, as Sasuke ran to Orochimaru, knowing full well that his brother was gambling with death. Itachi predicted Sasuke's remorse and despair after learning the truth, but still chose to carry all the pain and lies to his grave. He even planted Shirsue's Koto Amatsukami besides Naruto, using it as a failsafe in case Sasuke fell into darkness. He embedded Amaterasu into Sasuke's eye, preparing for any future threat. If not for the chaos Obito brought and a string of coincidences, Itachi's plan might have gone off without a hitch. It was flawless. As a fellow Uchiha, Kei found Itachi infuriating. He even wondered if the man was insane. But Kei couldn't help admiring that kind of ruthlessness. Compared to him, Kei still felt like a person. Itachi? He'd transcended that. And now, even Kakashi was showing a kind of Kiryu. One that allowed him to face death head-on for the mission. Maybe it was for the village. Maybe it was atonement. But it was powerful. And it shook Kei, just a little. He fell into silence, weighing the plan's feasibility. Meanwhile, Kakashi walked up and pressed one of Minato's special kunai into Kei's hand. Sensei said to use this in an emergency. The front lines are, well, you'll understand. I'm leaving Rin to you, Kakashi said flatly. Don't let anything happen to her. I'm counting on you, Kei. Don't, Kakashi. Please don't. Rin, having recovered from the shock, cried out hysterically. I'm sorry, Rin, Kakashi replied, calm and composed. I have a duty to fulfill. I may not be able to protect you anymore, but you must live. That's my last request. I understand, Kakashi. Kei took the kunai and gave him a nod. I'll protect her. And if needed, I'll use this to have Minato-sensei evacuate her. Maybe it was Kei's promise, but Kakashi gave a small smile, just a sliver of one, then turned and walked out of the cave. Thanks to Ayaka's reconnaissance, they already knew the direction with the lightest guard. Even if Kakashi suspected it was a trap, he'd still go. Kei watched his retreating figure, then glanced at the kunai in his hand, his expression becoming distant. Kakashi was heading to his death. If the plan worked, great. If not, well, Kei liked Kakashi as a character, but that didn't mean he was willing to die for him. He'd mourn his death, but he'd choose his own life over Kakashi's every time. Still, something felt off. If they could think of this strategy, why couldn't IWA Nin? What if this was exactly what IWA wanted? What if there was something even worse waiting? With that thought, Kei picked up the map and studied it. Fortunately, he'd been a liberal arts student in his past life, so he could understand geography. But after a few minutes, he looked up with a grim face. No clues. The map was terrible. Most of the minor routes weren't even labeled properly. Finally, Kei gritted his teeth and made a terrifying decision, one that even frightened himself. Everyone, get ready. We're following Kakashi. Following him? Both Ayaka and Kenta looked stunned. Are you insane? He went to be bait. That was his decision. You want us to attack head-on now? Are you the crazy one, or am I? Kei narrowed his eyes and sneered. If we could think of this plan, don't you think IWA could too? Don't assume their tactics are dumb. They just underestimated the Cloud's vengeance and Konoha's resolve. They let us see that gap in their lines on purpose. Which means they might have guessed our next move. I have a plan. A plan? You mean a suicide plan? Ayaka snapped. Want me to kill you now? Kei's voice turned icy. You have two choices. 1. Follow orders. 2. Go join your dead clan members. Note, Kiryu equals quality. Uchiha Kei's tone was chilling, there wasn't the slightest hint of a joke in his voice. His eyes, without anyone noticing, had turned blood red, and the three tomo in his Sharingan rotated slowly. Rin Noera was completely stunned by the sight. She never would have imagined that someone from the same squad would act like this. What shook her even more was Hyuga Ayaka, who had always treated her kindly, also activating her Byakugan without hesitation. For a moment, the atmosphere turned oppressively tense. Meanwhile, Kenta Imai still wore his usual harmless smile, but the danger in his eyes, fixated on Rin, was unmistakable. The internal affairs of their squad were not for outsiders to know. And the secret they shared as a team was better left buried. Kenta wasn't acting for the sake of their squad, he had his own reasons. And leaving someone like Rin alive was simply too risky. Especially if Hyuga Ayaka and Uchiha Kei really clashed, things would spiral out of control fast. But Kenta doubted it would come to that. Ayaka wasn't crazy, at least not yet. Sure enough, she restrained herself. Uchiha Kei without his Sharingan was one thing, but now that he had awakened it, Ayaka had no intention of confronting him head-on. Even with the rules that restricted them, she didn't see much potential in someone without a Kekkei Genkai. But this was different. This new Uchiha Kei had dodged a lethal strike from Minato Namikaze himself. Ayaka didn't think she could match that speed. Let's hear your plan, she said with a touch of frustration, deactivating her Byakugan. You'd better have a real strategy, not some suicidal mission. I'm not even sure I'll survive, Kei replied, deactivating his Sharingan as well. That feeling just now, it was exhilarating. Like I said before, whatever we're after, IWA Nin are after it too. And looking at this map, the area with the fewest enemies? That's a kill zone. It's a trap. Once Kakashi enters, reinforcements from nearby points can converge instantly. So what? Ayaka's gaze stayed on the map. You want us to march in there and die with Kakashi? But if we pick another route to break through, Kei said coolly, they can still pull their forces back. And the other paths are even more fortified. We're outnumbered. Though Kei couldn't find any hidden clues on the map, he could already infer a lot from its layout and Ayaka's intel. The Iwa wouldn't be careless enough to station so few forces at a weak point. That had to be intentional, either to lure them in or to fake a retreat. Kei didn't think Iwa were dumb enough to bluff in such a high-stakes situation. More likely, it was a trap, either a squad of elite ninja lying in wait, or a pincer ambush just waiting to spring. Any typical ninja might avoid that obvious bait and attack from another angle. But Kei? He was planning something bold. He was going straight through it. It was a gamble, yes. But if it worked, the path ahead would be wide open, straight to Kannabi Bridge. Kei wasn't the gambling type, but this time, he had an ace up his sleeve, Minato's special kunai. Before they parted, Kakashi had passed it to him. Kei could now summon Minato whenever he needed. You're saying it's definitely a trap? Ayaka and Kenta seemed to follow his line of thought, even if Kei hadn't said it out loud. Not just a possibility. It's likely, Kei nodded. So I'm planning to go with something extreme. But if we charge in like this, we'll all die, Captain, Kenta scratched his head. But when he saw Kei create multiple shadow clones, his eyes lit up. Ah, you're going to bait them with clones? Exactly. Ayaka nodded in realization. They won't want to waste chakra on large jutsu in the rear lines. So your clones hit a point hard, force a response, and while they're distracted, we hit the real target alongside Kakashi. Brilliant, Kei chuckled. He honestly couldn't stand these two, but he had to admit, smart teammates really made missions easier. He glanced at Rin, still looking completely lost. Kei didn't bother explaining. She might be a capable kunoichi, even a noble one, but she certainly wasn't the brightest. Once the plan was clear, everyone split off shadow clones in multiple directions. The real team followed closely behind Kakashi. Splitting off clones with equal chakra reserves was a heavy drain for all of them. But Kei noticed that both Kenta and Ayaka instantly popped a soldier pill into their mouths, boosting their chakra recovery as they moved. Even Kei did the same. Veterans of war knew how to survive. It might not restore much chakra, but even a sliver could mean the difference between life and death. Iwa probably counted on that. They didn't expect anyone to take this kind of risk. Kei swallowed his pill and led the way, keeping his breathing controlled, steps light, following Kakashi while conserving energy. Don't get us killed, Ayaka said coldly, not caring that others were within earshot. 7 years on the battlefield, I'm not throwing it all away. I've been here 6, Kei replied flatly. Kenta's the longest, 8 years, right? If we didn't all carry the same conviction, we wouldn't be here now. I may not like you two, we're two alike, but we have to work together if we want to make it out. Kenta gave a silent nod, his usual fake smile gone. Even Ayaka, after a moment's pause, nodded as well, she didn't argue. Only Rin still seemed completely in the dark, weak and confused. She had no idea what the other three were talking about, or what kind of bond they shared. The night was cold and quiet. 5 shadows darted silently through the woods, one after another. In the latter half of the night, Kakashi finally arrived at the area guarded by the Iwa. Carefully controlling his breathing and movements, he hid among the dense foliage, silently observing their every move. Kakashi was fully aware of the importance of this mission, and even more aware of the consequences that might come from volunteering for it. Death. It was terrifying, but not so terrifying that he would shy away. His best friend, Uchiha Obito, had faced death head-on. Why couldn't he? He had Obito's dying wish, to protect Rin. He also had the guidance of his teacher, Minato Namikaze, who encouraged him to see the future through Obito's eyes. But the guilt gnawing at him, and the sudden appearance of Uchiha Kei, had sparked a decision in his heart. Obito had died at the hands of the Iwa. Kakashi would avenge him. Though Minato had resolved the situation back then, it was Uchiha Kei who had saved Kakashi and his teammates in the first place. Being from the same Uchiha clan as Obito, Kei had left a deep impression on Kakashi, one of trust and admiration. They were from the same generation. Kakashi vaguely remembered Kei, not particularly weak, but not outstanding either. His battlefield performance had always been average. Yet the fact that Kei was still alive proved his abilities. Now, with the Sharingan awakened, Kei had become someone Kakashi was willing to entrust Rin's safety to. Just to be sure, Kakashi had even handed Minato's special kunai to Kei. With those preparations in place, Kakashi believed that if he could just stall the Iwa Nin and give his team the opportunity they needed, they'd be able to sneak into enemy territory and complete their mission. Rin would be safe. Obito. I may be joining you soon. Kakashi took a deep breath, then quickly formed hand seals. He created 4 shadow clones and immediately had them transform and scatter. The clones evenly shared his chakra, weakening him significantly, but making the deception more convincing. That brief spike in chakra didn't go unnoticed, as several Iwa Nin became alert. Still, Kakashi didn't mind. Drawing attention was the point. But their swift reaction was concerning. It meant there were more elite shinobi here than he'd anticipated. Soon, Kakashi noticed one Iwa Nin using a summoning technique, likely sending a message. Calling for reinforcements? Kakashi thought grimly. Before he could respond, a sharp sound of something slicing through the air pierced his ears. A kunai flew at him with terrifying speed, and struck. It's over, brat, a cold voice whispered behind him. Kakashi turned, only to see no one there. Don't worry. The others will be joining you soon. The voice was laced with cruelty. But as the kunai-wielding attacker withdrew his blade from Kakashi's body, the image dissolved into smoke. Substitution jutsu. When did he, the enemy was caught off guard, but not for long. As the sound of another attack came from behind, he instinctively leapt backward while drawing a kunai to block. He was skilled, clearly a veteran. But with his Sharingan, Kakashi read through his defense effortlessly. Even so, his counterattack wasn't fatal. The enemy's quick retreat limited the damage to just a gash on his chest. Damn brat, the man cursed as he emerged from camouflage, rubbing the wound and glaring at Kakashi. Sharingan. So that's how you saw through my camouflage technique. What a nice surprise, an eye worth collecting. Kakashi frowned. He hadn't expected to face someone like this. The technique was eerily familiar. One of the shinobi who had helped kill Obito had used something similar. He tightened his grip on his kunai, ready to strike again, but his expression darkened. All of his clones were gone. From all sides, 4 Iwa Nin emerged, surrounding him completely. Kakashi hadn't even bought enough time to slow them down. How strong were these guys? He didn't have time to think. The chakra he'd spent on the clones had left him even more drained. Now, all he could do was stall them, anything to prevent them from relaying information or retreating to regroup. You're a naive little brat, one Iwa Nin sneered. Did you really think we wouldn't see through your little tricks? I was curious who you'd send as bait. Never thought it'd be you, Hatake Kakashi. Kakashi said nothing. Better to conserve his strength and restore some chakra. Your teammates must be trying to flank us elsewhere, right? Unfortunately for you, we didn't send many reinforcements in the first place. And just recently, we received a report, some of our units spotted suspicious movement in another area. The Iwa Nin chuckled darkly. Trying to recover chakra. Pointless. Your fate is sealed. Your friend's fate is sealed. Now then, let's see what you've got. Let's see what this grand plan of yours is. With that, the 4 Iwa Nin charged in unison. Kakashi leapt into the air, narrowly dodging the first wave. But inside, his heart was in turmoil. Was my sacrifice meaningless? He had to admit, it was a brilliant trap. A straightforward strategy, yet brutally effective. Still, Kakashi wasn't ready to give up. If they were trying to capture him alive, he might have a chance. Otherwise, he wouldn't last more than a few rounds. These Iwa were strong. His chakra wasn't totally drained. If he played it right, he could buy some time. But still, try was the best he could hope for. Drawing a sharp breath, Kakashi steeled himself. He would do everything in his power. And if it came to it, he would destroy his left eye before he let it fall into the hands of the people who killed Obito. Kakashi has already made his move, but he was quickly discovered. In a forest some distance away from Kakashi's position, Hyuga Ayaka was carefully observing the situation. At the same time, she was trying to recover her chakra as much as possible. Chakra recovery, even with the aid of soldier pills, came with side effects. Though soldier pills didn't restore much and their side effects were relatively minor, small things added up over time. Use a little here and there, and before long, the accumulation could cause significant problems. Not just her, Uchiha Kei and Imai Kenta were also trying to recover their chakra naturally. As long as there was time, relying too much on pills was unwise. Of course, if it came down to life or death, no one would care about side effects. Uchiha Kei slowly opened his eyes. Although he possessed the Sharingan, when it came to long-distance reconnaissance, he could never compare with the Byakugan users. "How's the situation?" Kei asked after some thought. "Have you figured out how they're relaying information?" "Summoning jutsu," Ayaka replied quickly. "They're using it to communicate. I think we're about to be discovered too." "Our plan worked, Captain," Kenta chuckled as he scratched his head. "If Kakashi's surrounded by Iwa, then why don't we just head over there?" "No way. That's," Rin Noera immediately objected, but Ayaka cut her off. "It's worth considering. Didn't Hataki-senpai already prepare for this possibility?" But he's our comrade," Rin protested. "Don't forget what mission we're on, Chunin Noera. Do you want Kakashi to walk the same path his father did?" Kei frowned at the two arguing women. Ayaka's suggestion was sound, but did they think the enemy was stupid? Sure, there were only 4 guarding the area, but charging in recklessly would only cause more problems. Still, not trying wasn't an option either. As Ayaka said, this mission was critical. If Kakashi could really stall the enemy and they managed to break through, things could turn in their favor. Just as Kei was mulling it over, Ayaka suddenly went silent, her face pale and tense. Rin and Kenta also reacted the same way. Kei hadn't sensed anything himself, but he had a good idea of what had happened. Sure enough, moments later, information flooded Kei's mind. One of their decoy squads had been wiped out. Kei's clone had dispersed on its own, but the others had been killed. "We don't have time to hesitate," Kei sighed. "What's Kakashi's status?" "Humph, he's barely hanging on," Ayaka grunted. "While we were arguing, he's been burning through chakra like crazy. Even with shadow clones, this is absurd." "Save it," Kei cut her off. He wasn't about to tell her it was because of the Sharingan. "No more delays. We're going to back up Kakashi, then break out before more enemies show up." "Damn it." Ayaka cursed, but she had no choice. Kei ignored her grumbling. Kenta remained silent as well. He probably knew that if they didn't act, someone might not make it out. Taking a deep breath, Kei launched forward. Ayaka and Kenta quickly followed, with Rin bringing up the rear. As the medical ninja, she understood her role well. The 4 of them surged ahead, rapidly closing the several hundred meters separating them from Kakashi. As they ran, Kei activated his Sharingan. Instantly, time seemed to slow down around him, a sensation he'd felt before but never fully embraced due to fear of exposure. But thanks to Minato-sensei's help, Kei had finally obtained what he wanted. There was no need to hold back now. Their ambush immediately drew the attention of the Iwa. With his Sharingan, Kei could clearly see the shock written on their faces. But he wasn't going to give them any time to react. When they were still several dozen meters away, Kei flared his chakra and vanished in an instant. When he reappeared, he was right in front of an Iwa Nin. So fast. The Iwa Nin had already been rattled by the ambush. Kei's sudden movement left him pale with fear. Though the others snapped out of their daze, they were too far to help. The Iwa Nin that Kei targeted suddenly showed a crazed expression and charged toward Kei's kunai. But Kei had already seen through the act. With Sharingan, every movement was obvious. He twisted his body slightly and thrust his kunai toward midair, ignoring the enemy right in front of him. The kunai pierced empty space, until a spray of blood confirmed the hit. Instantly, Kei vanished again with a body flicker, reappearing beside a retreating and exhausted Kakashi. "You! Why are you here?" Kakashi asked weakly. "Did you find something?" "Yeah, we found a lot," Kei said, glancing at the blood-dripping kunai hovering in the air. "No time to talk. You have soldier pills, right? Take one. We need to finish this fast." As he spoke, the air around the kunai distorted, revealing the form of an Iwa Nin using camouflage jutsu, hidden in plain sight. Truly unfortunate, this jutsu could be powerful on any battlefield, but he had the bad luck of facing Hitaki Kakashi and Uchiha Kei. Not just him. Another Iwa Nin named Oishi had suffered the same fate at the hands of Uchiha Obito. Just then, Ayaka and Kenta arrived. Kei turned his gaze to the three Iwa Nin ahead of them, who looked clearly uneasy. He took a deep breath and ordered, "Chunin Noera, stay with Kakashi. Ayaka, Kenta, let's take care of the rest." Uchiha Kei's words were arrogant, intentionally so. He knew full well that what he said served mainly to boost his allies' morale and intimidate the enemy. The Iwa Nin he had just killed wasn't weak by any means. But no matter how powerful a shinobi is, even they can fall victim to a surprise attack. Even someone as formidable as Uchiha Madara had once been caught off guard and had his heart ripped out. And the guy Kei just killed? He wasn't even worth remembering his name. Kei's mastery of the body flicker technique was already exceptional. Add to that the distraction provided by Kakashi and the sudden appearance of more Konoha shinobi, his enemy's mindset was completely thrown off. It was the perfect cocktail of misdirection and timing, allowing Kei to land a lethal blow. But that was then. Now the enemy was prepared. Things were about to get much harder. Still, Kei didn't panic. He had his trump cards, the Mangekyo Sharingan and, if things got dire enough, the ability to summon Minato Namikaze. Sure, calling Minato required the situation to be truly desperate, which was honestly kind of a pain, but Kei was confident. If he really did summon him, Minato would show up. He always did. As long as I use my abilities wisely, and worst comes to worst, I summon Namikaze. I refuse to believe we can't take these bastards down. He clenched his fists as he reassured himself. By now, the Iwa Nin were done with words and had already launched their assault. Seeing them charge toward him, Kei showed no fear. He quickly pulled several shuriken from his pouch and flung them at a charging Iwa Nin with practiced ease. The enemy seemed a bit too eager, charging straight at the shuriken like an idiot. Every shuriken hit. But instead of celebrating, Kei jumped into the air. His Sharingan had seen through the illusion, the enemy had used the earth clone technique. As expected, the Iwa Nin dissolved into a puddle of mud, just in time for Kei to notice the ground beneath him had turned into a bog. Earth release, swamp of the underworld. Kei recognized it at a glance. It wasn't the first time he'd dealt with this jutsu. But this time, the enemy wasn't done. As Kei leapt skyward, the caster quickly formed another set of hand seals. Suddenly, a massive earth dragon lunged up from the swamp. Kei frowned but didn't panic. Chakra surged through his Sharingan as he tracked every movement of the attack. A smooth mid-air spin, he dodged the dragon with ease. Then, using the beast's massive body as a springboard, he kicked off it and launched himself toward solid ground. His movements were as graceful as a dragon rising from the sea, effortless, almost poetic. While Kei avoided every strike without breaking a sweat, the others weren't so lucky. Ayaka and the rest of the team had to scramble, ducking and rolling just to dodge the swamp and the dragon. By the end of it, they were soaked in mud and covered in grime. The Iwa Nin who had cast the jutsu noticed that Kei had completely evaded the attack, but he didn't seem surprised. Fighting a Uchiha one-on-one is never easy. Your ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu, they can see through it all. Even if the opponent is a mere chunin or a gifted genin, no one dares take them lightly. Unless you're faster than them, can resist genjutsu, or land a one-shot kill, it's nearly impossible. And this guy clearly didn't believe he was faster than Kei. Still, he found himself both wary and intrigued. "Who are you?" he asked. "A guy like you, I've never heard of. Just got on the battlefield?" "No," Kei replied, happy to trade a few words while recovering some chakra. "I've been here a while." "And you are?" The Iwa Nin looked momentarily surprised, then smirked. "You don't know me? All right then, allow me to introduce myself properly, so you'll know exactly who it is that's going to kill you." The air around him suddenly shifted, danger thick and tangible. Kei's Sharingan flared to life, and what he saw shocked him. The man's chakra was massive, oppressively so. Who the hell is this guy? Kei cursed internally. Is this bastard the Tsuchikage in disguise? No, something didn't add up. As he racked his memory, the Iwa Nin spoke again. "My name is," he said, just as he exploded into motion with impossible speed, throwing a devastating punch toward Kei. "Kitsuchi. The Yellow Earth. Shit." Kei finally recognized him. This bastard really was a monster just like his father. The son of Inoki, the fence-sitter, Yellow Earth, someone who had survived all the way to the Fourth Ninja War. His vitality was absurd, like some kind of immortal turtle. If Yellow Earth was in his 40s during the Fourth War, then back calculating, he'd be in his 20s or 30s now. It lined up perfectly. Kei dodged the blow by the skin of his teeth. The shockwave from the punch shattered the ground beneath them. If he'd been even a second slower, he'd be dead. But Yellow Earth wasn't about to let up. Missing his first strike, he instantly charged again, his attacks relentless, uncaring of how much chakra he spent. It was clear, he was willing to burn through everything to exhaust and kill Kei. And honestly, that was a problem. This guy's fighting style countered Kei perfectly. Kei's chakra reserve simply couldn't hold out in a prolonged fight like this. Worse, as Kei's shadow clones from other areas began to dispel, he knew the Iwa forces were figuring things out. With a little effort and a summoning jutsu, they could soon locate the real escape point. And by then, even summoning Minato might not be enough to turn the tide. As he weighed his options, Kei's fingers subtly brushed the handle of his marked kunai. But before he could act, crack. A piercing sound, like 1,000 birds crying in unison, rang out behind him. "Chidori." That's Chidori. The moment Uchiha Kei heard the distinct sound, he immediately recognized what was going on. Even though he doubted Kakashi had fully recovered his chakra, the fact that he was able to fight was more than welcome. A 3-on-3 scenario like this should never be handled with solo duels, especially for a shinobi squad. The optimal strategy would have been to gang up on one opponent and eliminate them quickly, then deal with the remaining two. Unfortunately, the lack of trust among Kei, Hyuga Ayaka, and Imai Kenta made such coordination nearly impossible. Throughout this mission, their teamwork had been almost non-existent. Even when facing formidable enemies, each of them stubbornly fought on their own. No wonder Konoha started drilling the importance of teamwork into genin. With people like Uchiha Kei around, they probably had no choice but to enforce it from the start. But Kei couldn't care less about that. His current situation with Ayaka and Kenta was a case of forced cooperation without trust. Given the choice, none of them would have teamed up with each other. If they had to take this mission, they probably would have preferred being paired with some naive, overly optimistic rookie. So, with no teamwork to rely on, everyone was just doing their own thing. Fortunately, Kei had better luck than the others. Kakashi had arrived just in time to assist. The moment Kei hit the ground, Kakashi charged straight at Kitsuchi, Kei, Yellow Earth, and slammed a Chidori toward his chest. The sudden assault disrupted Kitsuchi's attack rhythm, but he reacted quickly, raising a wall of earth just in time to block the strike. Kei let out a small breath of relief and prepared to act, but then he saw Kakashi yank his arm free and launch into the air for another strike. Kei blinked in surprise. Is this guy trying to help or just causing chaos? Kakashi's sudden arrival had thrown Kitsuchi off, but now he was also interrupting Kei's own momentum. The lack of coordination was clearly a problem, one that could get them killed. Kakashi had probably grown so used to others adapting to him that he didn't even consider syncing up. Kei had no choice but to try and sync with Kakashi, even though that wasn't exactly his strong suit. He wasn't Uchiha Obito, after all. TCH, what a reckless guy. Kei muttered. But there wasn't time to complain. Chidori was a terrifyingly powerful jutsu, its piercing force and explosive burst were beyond imagination. However, it came with a critical flaw: it needed a long charge and required precise vision during high-speed movement. Thanks to Obito's sacrifice, the Sharingan had solved the problem of dynamic vision. In fact, it could be said that Chidori was practically made for Uchiha. But the issue of distance still remained. Without room to sprint, Chidori's power could be neutered. Kitsuchi wasn't just any shinobi. As the son of the third Tsuchikage, he didn't ride on his father's fame, he earned his place through sheer skill. He instantly recognized both the strengths and weaknesses of Chidori. So naturally, he wasn't about to give Kakashi room to charge. Still, Kei wasn't about to let things go Kitsuchi's way. He knew his job now, by Kakashi in opening. If they could take out Kitsuchi, the other two Iwagakure shinobi wouldn't be a threat. Taking down the Tsuchikage's only son wouldn't just be a strategic win, it'd be a political nightmare for Iwagakure. Guess I'm really doing something important now, huh? Kei smirked. In a way, even without perfect teamwork, their attacks were still tying up the enemy. Kei glanced around briefly. Hyuga Ayaka was holding on, even under pressure. She was proving herself stronger than either Niji or Hinata ever were in his memories. The battlefield was the true catalyst for growth. Despite her injuries, her defensive skills, typical of the Hyuga clan, were keeping her alive. Blood was at the corner of her mouth, but she was still standing. As for Kenta and Rin, their situation didn't look too bad. Kenta, despite always wearing that fake smile, seemed to have a hidden depth to him. Carrying Rin on his back like a support accessory, and still keeping an IWA shinobi at bay. That was no easy feat, no wonder he'd survived 8 years on the battlefield. Refocusing, Kei charged back into the fray. Kakashi's second strike had reached Kitsuchi, but the latter casually sidestepped it. At that close range, Chidori couldn't reach full effectiveness. Kakashi was clearly frustrated, and understandably so. He wasn't yet the legend known as the Copy Ninja. As Kakashi was kicked away and Kitsuchi moved in for the finishing blow, Kei appeared in his path, slashing a kunai straight at his chest. It was fast, precise, and deadly. Kitsuchi had to halt his pursuit and dodge. Annoyed, he swung a fist at Kei. Kei leapt back instantly, but Kitsuchi showed his elite ninja skills. He rapidly formed hand seals and slammed his hands onto the ground, chakra surged through the earth. Kei, however, remained calm. His Sharingan spun as he neared the ground. Just before landing, he pressed his right hand to the earth, shifting sideways mid-air. Spikes of earth burst through where he should have landed, impaling only his afterimage. Kei touched down and immediately began evasive maneuvers, his body moved in a dazzling rhythm of sudden stops, angle shifts, accelerations, and rapid pivots. It looked almost too smooth, as if he'd practiced it countless times. Neither the earth spikes nor the explosive tag-laced kunai Kitsuchi hurled afterward could land a single blow. Kei dodged them all effortlessly. It was clear, Uchiha Kei with his Sharingan was on a completely different level. But Kitsuchi seemed to realize that stalling Kei was pointless. He turned his focus back to Kakashi. He's switching targets. Uchiha Kei sharply noticed that Kitsuchi no longer seemed interested in him. While this gave him a brief moment of relief, it also prompted him to start planning a way out. By this point, their objective had basically been exposed. If the Iwa Nin lacked confidence, they could have easily fallen back to defend the Kannabi Bridge. But from the way his shadow clones had reacted, Kei had already deduced one thing: these Iwa Nin wanted them all dead, right here and now. Which led Kei to wonder, could Iwagakure be short on troops? After all, Kumogakure wasn't exactly easy to deal with, especially with the fourth Raikage now in charge. Given that the third Raikage had died, the fourth likely harbored deep resentment and wouldn't just let that go. Besides, Kumo had already withdrawn from the war with Konoha. With the leaf problem out of the way, they were probably gearing up to clash directly with Iwagakure. If that were the case, Iwa would need to move troops to defend their borders, especially along the coastline and near the land of waterfalls. That would leave their rear vulnerable. So, was that why these Iwa Nin were so desperate to stop them here? Because if even one of them slipped through to cause havoc at the rear, they might be impossible to track down. Kei clenched his fists slightly. Even if things didn't happen this way in the original timeline, they sure as hell are happening to me now. So forget canon, this is my reality. He glanced at Kakashi, who was clearly exhausted and battered. His chakra was nearly depleted, but with the Sharingan, he should still survive, as long as he wasn't swarmed. So Kei made a decision: deal with the other two Iwa Nin first, and then gang up on Kitsuchi. If they could take him down after that, the tides might just turn. Now that Kitsuchi was wary of Kei, a sneak attack was no longer viable. So, Kei dashed toward Kitsuchi again, but his true attention was now elsewhere, on the Iwa Nin currently pummeling Hyuga Ayaka. This wasn't about chivalry. If Kei was going to feel soft-hearted, he'd rather waste those feelings on Rin. At least she was more innocent than Ayaka. His choice was tactical. Ayaka was proving to be a surprisingly tough opponent, even under heavy assault. Her defense, bolstered by the Hyuga clan's skills, had reduced her to a living fortress. The Iwa Nin attacking her was completely focused, locked into the fight, and that kind of focus made him the perfect target. The other Iwa Nin, fighting Imai Kenta, seemed to be on the lookout for an opening too, likely thinking along similar lines. Kei gritted his teeth and threw a subtle hand signal toward Kakashi. Whether Kakashi saw it or not didn't matter. He quickly formed hand seals, chakra swirling into a deep blue arc before erupting into flames. Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. A massive fireball roared toward Kitsuchi, momentarily stealing everyone's attention. Seizing the distraction, Kei created a shadow clone to continue the frontal assault while he himself slipped into hiding. He knew this cover wouldn't last long, there wasn't enough space, and the clone wouldn't last. Still, all he needed was one opening. His eyes locked onto the Iwa Nin assaulting Ayaka. As the man finally broke through her defenses and drove a terrifying punch toward her chest, Kei felt even his own breath hitch. Ayaka paled in horror. She could already imagine the outcome if that punch landed. Gritting her teeth, she pooled what little chakra she had left to reinforce her chest in a desperate final defense. But it wasn't enough. Even though Iwa Nin weren't known for their brutal hand-to-hand style like Kumo Nin, their physical strength was monstrous. That punch tore through Ayaka's defense like paper. Her abdomen felt like it had been torn apart, and worse, her arms shattered trying to block the blow. Damn it! Ayaka cursed internally. That single blow had completely taken her out of the fight. As she lay there, trembling and barely conscious, despair washed over her. She had so many dreams yet to realize. Why did it have to end here? Why didn't Uchiha Kei summon Minato? Was it only when he was dying that it counted as urgent? Ironically, she was right. That's exactly how Kei saw it. But right then, Kei made his move. As his clone was impaled by Kitsuchi's stone spear, Kei burst from the ground like a bullet. His body flicker technique was so fast that even he struggled to breathe, but he didn't care. Chakra surged through the kunai in his hand. Before the Iwa Nin could react, Kei drove the kunai deep into his left back ribs, twisting it viciously. The Iwa Nin never saw it coming. He had assumed Kitsuchi could handle a couple kids just fine. He was so focused on Ayaka that he didn't even sense Kei's approach. Blood sprayed as Kei pulled the kunai out. The man's eyes widened for a moment, then closed for good. Shadow clone. Original. You damn brat. Kitsuchi bellowed with fury. Kei's sneak attack had landed like a slap across Kitsuchi's face. Genboku, the Iwa Nin who just died, was not just a subordinate, but an old comrade. They shared history and camaraderie. And now, Kei had murdered him. The last shred of mercy in Kitsuchi's heart disappeared in an instant. He no longer cared about capturing anyone alive for interrogation. He only wanted revenge. Uchiha brat, you're courting death. Kitsuchi, consumed by rage, had completely lost it. Both of his subordinates had been taken down by this damned Uchiha kid. If the death of the first one didn't affect him too much, given that they weren't particularly close and he still wanted intel on Konoha, then the second death was a completely different story. That was Genboku, his childhood friend, someone he had grown up with. His real friend. At this moment, Kitsuchi didn't care about gathering intel anymore. He only wanted one thing, for this Uchiha brat to die. The fury of a rampaging Kitsuchi was beyond terrifying. Kakashi had planned to take advantage of a brief distraction to ambush him with Chidori, but Kitsuchi's reaction speed was beyond anything Kakashi had anticipated. The instant the Chidori's sharp screech rang out, Kitsuchi crouched down and slammed both palms to the ground. His powerful chakra surged into the earth. In the next moment, a 10-meter-high wall of stone burst from the ground, blocking Kakashi's Chidori perfectly. Earth Release, Earth-Style Wall. Though a basic Earth Release technique, in Kitsuchi's hands it became incredibly formidable. However, lightning beats Earth. Kakashi's Chidori easily pierced through the stone wall. But instead of feeling victorious, Kakashi's expression turned grim. Because the moment his Chidori burst through the wall, Kitsuchi had already sidestepped the attack, and simultaneously launched a counterpunch. That terrifying punch shattered his own earth release technique into rubble and landed squarely in Kakashi's chest. The sound of bones fracturing echoed through the air. Kakashi was sent flying, blood spraying everywhere, and slammed violently into the ground. His chest caved in slightly, he looked like he was on the brink of death. Uchiha Kei was stunned by the sight. Is Kakashi really going to die like this? Kakashi. Not far away, Rin Noera screamed as she noticed the scene. She tried to run to him, but a nearby Iwagakure shinobi kicked her away. Her rash move ended up exposing their defense line, throwing Imai Kenta into deeper trouble as he was forced to react. The coordinated defense of their team collapsed in an instant. Kei didn't need to look to know, Kenta was probably more furious at Rin than at the enemy shinobi right now. If he weren't worried about Kei going rogue or calling Minato, Kenta might have actually taken the chance to eliminate her himself. But at this point, Kenta gave up on protecting her entirely. If Rin drew the enemy's attention and died, so be it. Still, the enemy shinobi returned his focus to Kenta after knocking Rin away. He was intent on stopping anyone from reaching Kakashi. And Kenta wasn't doing so well. His wounds were piling up, and he was nearing his limit. Kei silently observed everything. He never truly cared about his teammates, and certainly not about the lives of any canon characters. After all, how could he worry about others when he wasn't even sure he could survive himself? He'd already saved Kakashi twice by accident. He thought things were finally getting back on track. But then Kakashi was nearly killed in one punch by the future father of the fourth Uchiha. The fragility of life struck Kei hard, but even more than that, it was the unexpectedness of it all. Was Kakashi, the eternal cockroach, really going to die here? Still, Kei had a plan. With Kakashi on the verge of death and Ayaka Hyuga severely wounded, surely this counted as the dire moment Minato had mentioned, right? Unfortunately, there was no time to think things through. Kitsuchi, after disposing of Kakashi, charged straight at Kei. His overwhelming killing intent and chakra made it clear, you must die today. I have to summon Minato now /. This situation is already beyond saving. Kei muttered internally. He quickly used the body flicker technique to widen the distance and took out the kunai Kakashi had entrusted to him, channeling chakra into it. He didn't know Kakashi's current status, but if he didn't act fast, their whole team might get wiped out. But luck was not on Kei's side this time. Even after infusing chakra into the kunai, nothing happened. Too far away. Needs more time. Or is Minato busy right now, while dodging Kitsuchi's relentless attacks? Kei pondered the issue. Kitsuchi had always left a deep impression on Kei from the anime and manga. He remembered that during the Fourth Great Ninja War, Kitsuchi led the 2nd Division of the Allied forces and had once punched a tailed beast-transformed Kinkaku across the battlefield. He even faced off against the Ten Tails, using powerful earth release techniques like Earth Style, Mountain Jutsu to suppress the Gedo statue and the Ten Tails. Even if this wasn't his peak, he was already showcasing glimpses of his future strength. Each punch he threw now cracked the earth, and Kei knew, if one of those landed, he'd die on the spot. If not for his Sharingan's high-speed perception and proficiency with the body flicker technique, Kei would have been turned into a bloody smear already. He tried to counterattack, but it was no use. Kei's limited offensive abilities were useless against a berserk Kitsuchi. Earlier, Kitsuchi would at least dodge Kei's kunai or shuriken. Now, he didn't even bother. He wasn't worried about getting hurt anymore. He just wanted to kill. Kei couldn't touch him. The only way would be to close in and land a kunai in his heart, just like he did to Jinboku earlier. But now, Kitsuchi had chakra cloaked around his entire body, leaving no openings. The longer the fight dragged on, the more anxious Kei became. With his Sharingan, he could see that Kakashi really was on the verge of death. And soon, Iwagakure reinforcements would arrive. Kenta's situation was already dire, like a cat playing with its prey, and the prey was nearly dead. As Kitsuchi closed in again, Kei's eyes burned with madness of his own. If you're so determined to kill me, then I'll make sure you lose all your teammates too. Uchiha Kei was truly left with no other option. This cursed mission, plus this damn stonehead, Kitsuchi, had pushed him into a corner with no good choices left. At this point, Kei even wondered if staying behind as one of those so-called decoys might have turned out better in the end. But there was no way to know now. He didn't even know whether the captives he rescued, the decoys, were still alive. If Kei and the others survived, but all the decoys died, especially if Minato Namikaze reported everything, then it wasn't hard to imagine how bad things could get for them. This mission wasn't just any mission, it was one of the most critical ones for Konoha. The higher-ups were counting on its success to use as leverage in negotiations with the Iwa Nin. They wanted to end this long-drawn-out stalemate and were clearly in a rush, probably hoping to wrap things up before the Cloud and Stone truly went to war. That way, they'd be able to claim more at the negotiation table. Honestly, it was hard to blame them. But if this mission ended in failure, then there'd be only one path left for Kei: scratch a line through his forehead protector and flee to the land of rain. He'd never had any intention of joining those extremist maniacs, never wanted to fill the world with love or bring peace to all nations. That stuff was just nonsense to him. He was just an ordinary person, completely, utterly ordinary. His dreams were always small, always practical. But now, he had to start considering an escape plan. He had no intention of dying out here. Waiting for backup from Minato? That wasn't happening anytime soon. Kei didn't have time to decide whether to run or stay, and being relentlessly chased by Kitsuchi was seriously testing his patience. You're going this crazy just because I killed one of your teammates? Fine then. I'll kill your last remaining teammate, and I'll see just how far your madness can go. Kei made up his mind. He still had one trump card, something he'd longed to use but had only just unlocked. Evading another Earth-style attack from Kitsuchi, Kei steadily retreated. Now that he had a plan, he deliberately moved in the direction of the remaining Iwa Nin. Kitsuchi was clearly on guard. Kei had just killed one of his teammates a few minutes ago, after all. But Kei was clever. He acted as if he realized he was getting too close to the Iwa Nin and immediately darted off in another direction, clearly trying to avoid being flanked. His panicked behavior, paired with Kitsuchi's long observation of his abilities, made Kitsuchi lower his guard, just a bit. From what he'd seen, this Uchiha brat didn't seem to have any genjutsu ability. He hadn't used any so far. Then again, Kitsuchi had made sure to avoid eye contact the entire time. He'd grown up hearing how terrifying the Uchiha could be. As for taijutsu, maybe not bad, but he was still young, still physically immature. Kitsuchi didn't see him as a real threat. Powerful ninjutsu. Kitsuchi could sense the kid's chakra reserves, they were running low. Even if he had a strong technique, he probably didn't have enough chakra left to use it. But just then, Kei took a deep breath and slowly bowed his head. Kitsuchi saw this and thought the brat was finally giving up. But he wasn't stupid. Uchiha were always full of tricks. Who knew what kind of trap he was about to spring? Still, tricks meant nothing in the face of overwhelming strength. Kitsuchi just needed to stay alert. But in that moment, the three tomo in Kei's Sharingan began spinning wildly. In an instant, they fused together. A triangular, diamond-shaped pattern formed in the center of his pupils. Kei lifted his head slightly, and the shape in his eyes started rotating gently. Suddenly, Kei felt as though a floodgate had burst inside him. Chakra surged out like a torrential flood, flowing directly into his eyes. The drain was overwhelming. Kei could tell, if it weren't for the sheer cost, and ignoring the strain on his vision, he could probably maintain this for 10 minutes. Maybe. But he didn't have that luxury. He was 13. He wasn't a Jinchuriki. Where was he supposed to get all that chakra from? And now he felt something else, a dormant force resting deep in his eyes. Silent and still, like stagnant water cut off from its source. But if awakened, it would burn, offering a terrifying burst of energy in exchange. Is this what they call ocular power? Kei wondered to himself. But there was no more time to dwell. Kitsuchi was closing in fast. Kei clenched his fists and unleashed every bit of chakra he had left. His face turned pale almost instantly. Chrono drift. With no hesitation, Kei activated the power of his right eye. He didn't dare try the stronger ability, Chrono Freeze, not knowing what kind of monstrous drain it might have. But even Chrono Drift left him feeling like his legs would give out. He couldn't collapse. Not here. He hadn't lived enough yet. Clutching Minato's kunai, Kei stumbled aside to dodge another strike from Kitsuchi, then slashed toward Kitsuchi's neck with everything he had. Clang! The kunai clashed with something hard, nearly slipping from Kei's grip. The sound was like metal against stone. He had no time to be shocked. He saw a thin red line appear on Kitsuchi's neck. Without pause, Kei leapt toward the last remaining Iwa Nin. He locked eyes with him, activating the chrono drift effect on both targets. At that moment, Kei felt a strange pressure build in his eyes. Maybe it was because it was his first time using this power, or maybe because he lacked experience, but even though his ocular energy hadn't drained too much, his control and stamina were clearly not enough. Clenching his teeth, he finally reached his target. The Iwa Nin had sensed something was wrong, he spun around at lightning speed. But to Kei, his movements looked no faster than a snail crawling. He gave the enemy no chance to react. Kei's kunai sliced cleanly across the ninja's neck. This time, there was no clang, only the sickeningly familiar sensation of flesh being cut. Kei saw the look in the man's eyes. It was filled with disbelief, and just a hint of fear. Akai. As time seemed to resume its normal flow, another roar burst from Kitsuchi's throat. But with that shout, the crimson gash across his neck grew even more pronounced. It was only then that he realized what he had truly encountered. Clutching his neck, he carefully assessed the damage. When his eyes turned to Uchiha Kei again, there was a level of wariness that hadn't been there before. Just moments ago, in a mere instant, Uchiha Kei had exploded with a speed that defied belief. It was even faster than the first time he had taken down Haruki and that ambush on Genboku. No matter how hard Kitsuchi tried, he simply couldn't understand it. How could this brat suddenly move like that? More baffling was why he had waited until his teammates were nearly dead before unleashing that power. If he had used it earlier, his comrades might not have been left in such miserable states. But confusion aside, one thing was clear, this kid needed to die. Had Kitsuchi not been so cautious, constantly on guard for tricks and setting up layers of defense, he might have already ended up as another notch on Kei's kill list. "You're impressive, Uchiha brat," Kitsuchi said, removing his hand from his wounded neck. "Your speed is astonishing. Not even Namikaze Minato could have done better. But it's unfortunate you ran into me, and now, you're out of options, aren't you? If you'd just used that power sooner." Kei didn't respond. He didn't care for Kitsuchi's gloating. If Kakashi hadn't been pushed to the brink of death, if Ayaka Hyuga hadn't been gravely injured, if Kitsuchi had just looked him in the eyes from the start, if Imai Kenta weren't too tied up to help, he wouldn't have used his Mangekyo Sharingan so soon. It was a last resort. Yes, the power was great. But in this stage of the war, it was practically non-renewable. And more importantly, Kei didn't want anyone knowing he had it. He knew far too well the chaos a pair of Mangekyo could cause. Just look at Uchiha Fugaku, the current clan head, he likely awakened it too, yet never dared to use it openly. His fate was grim, but still better than the reckless ones. Shisui had one of his eyes stolen. Itachi lived under the crushing weight of guilt and suspicion. Obito was a walking tragedy. And Madara turned into a tool and played like a puppet. Even Sasuke, who looked better off than the rest, if not for his ties to Naruto, Kakashi, and the village, would have been executed 10 times over for his actions. But Kei had no such bonds. And with the fragile state of the Uchiha's relationship with Konoha, he couldn't afford to risk exposure. Taking a deep breath, Kei staggered to his feet. His chakra was nearly depleted, but Kitsuchi clearly wasn't done with him. "Die, Uchiha brat." Sure enough, Kitsuchi didn't waste time. With a roar, he charged, chakra surging wildly around him. Dust exploded from beneath his feet as he lunged, fist aimed straight for Kei's face. Kei watched the attack coming. He could see the trajectory clearly, but tragically, his body simply couldn't move fast enough to dodge. The Mangekyo's drain was too much. After fighting for so long, he was spent. Damn it, where the hell is Minato? For the first time, Kei began to wonder if he'd been duped by that bright-eyed, friendly Jonin who always seemed so sincere. There was no time to dwell. Kei tried to shift aside, just enough to dodge the blow, but then, someone yanked him backward by the collar. A force, strong, but not overwhelming, dragged his weakened body away just in time. Boom! The impact was deafening. Debris scattered all around as the earth cracked from the blow. Kei's ears rang from the explosion, and before he knew it, he was on the ground, then being pulled, dragged across the dirt for nearly 10 meters. His neck and back ached from the sudden movement. Turning his head with effort, Kei was stunned to see, "You. Shut up. How long until Captain Minato arrives? And can you move?" Imai Kenta didn't even look at him, eyes locked on the smoldering front. "No idea about him. As for me, I need some time. I can hold him for 1 minute. If you're not back in fighting shape by then, I'm gone. Then you might as well leave now." Kei was surprised, but it all made sense now. Kenta was just like him, hesitating at the edge, debating whether to take that final, desperate step. But a single minute? What could Kei even accomplish in that time? Even if he downed an Akimichi clan chakra pill, it'd be impossible to recover full battle strength in 60 seconds. Kenta ignored his sarcasm. Hands trembling slightly, he gripped his short blade tightly, eyes fixed on the thick smoke ahead. "He's coming." The moment Kenta spoke, Kitsuchi burst through the dust cloud, charging straight at them, forming seals mid-dash. As he completed the hand signs, the ground beneath them began to quake violently. The tremors grew worse. Kenta struggled to stay upright. Kei, who had just barely gotten to his feet, was thrown back down again. He landed hard, sitting in the dirt, just in time to see Kitsuchi executing a precise sidestep around Kenta. In a flash, Kitsuchi drew a kunai with his left hand, aiming for Kenta's chest. And with his right, charged with terrifying chakra, he swung straight at Kei's face. For a moment, Kei truly despaired. In a frantic bid to survive, he ignored the pain and forced his Mangekyo open again. But his chakra reserves were too low. Regret crashed over him. Maybe he should have used this power sooner, wiped out these IWA shinobi first, and worried about the consequences later. As Kitsuchi closed in, Kei gripped his own kunai. This scene, it was just like his first battle. Helpless. Weak. Overwhelmed. He raised his hand in panic, fear blazing in his eyes, and then, just as he felt the wind from that deadly punch brush his cheek, Kitsuchi vanished. Huh? What's going on? Uchiha Kei stood frozen, dumbfounded by the scene before him. If not for the lingering sting of wind from that punch still brushing past his cheek, and the small tear on Imai Kenta's chest, he might have thought he'd fallen under a genjutsu. He couldn't make sense of what had just happened, until a realization struck him. It had to be Minato Namikaze. Who else but Minato could move fast enough to become a blur, fast enough to relocate someone in an instant using space-time jutsu? Sure enough, a thunderous boom echoed through the woods just a few dozen meters away, kicking up a towering cloud of dust. It didn't take a genius to figure out what that was. It had to be that punch from Kuratsuchi's father, Anoki's son. The one that was supposed to end Kei's life just moments ago. A shiver ran down Kei's spine. Had that blow landed on him directly, there wouldn't have been a trace of him left. He'd have been nothing but a pile of mangled flesh. Still trembling slightly, Kei finally let out a breath of relief. That sense of being moments away from death had shattered him. Even his Sharingan had deactivated. It took too much mental energy to maintain in his current state. If I'd known he was coming this late, I would have summoned him right away. What a miscalculation, Kei muttered, collapsing to the ground. Sorry, I'm late. A calm voice came from behind him, and the moment Kei heard it, every remaining trace of tension in his body melted away. It was Minato Namikaze, the yellow flash, his voice as composed as ever, though there was a grave undertone. I ran into some trouble on the way. I didn't expect Kitsuchi to be here. I didn't think things would get this out of hand. At least you came, Kei said, forcing himself upright and fishing out a chakra pill. Kakashi's in bad shape. So is Hyuga Ayaka. He had always hated taking these things, but now wasn't the time to be picky. Even a sliver of chakra would be enough to get him moving again, not fighting, just moving. With Minato here, Kei had no intention of doing anything heroic. He'd gladly take a supporting role on the sidelines while the real monster went to work. While Kei struggled to chew the dry pill, Minato quickly checked Kakashi's condition. When he returned, his expression was grim. "Can you move?" he asked, voice sharp. "We need to fall back. Now. We'll regroup at the rear and find a safe place to rest." "I think I can manage," Kei answered, staggering to his feet. Now it was all about willpower. "Good. I'll take Kakashi. You carry your teammate." Minato's voice left no room for argument. "Imai, you're a Chunin, right? You protect Rin. You're probably the only one left with enough strength to guard her. We have to move. Reinforcements are coming." Kei felt a spike of frustration. He was supposed to carry Hyuga Ayaka. In his condition. Was Minato serious? But the logic made sense. Kakashi was barely hanging on, his injuries were critical. Minato had to be the one to carry him. Rin was a medical ninja and needed protection. And Imai. Well, he was still on his feet. Kei sighed. He glanced over to Imai, who was now smiling gently and obediently hoisting an unconscious but relatively uninjured Rin onto his back. Fine, Kei thought, and bent down to lift Ayaka onto his own shoulders. He didn't say a word about Imai's earlier boast of lasting a minute. What was the point? The guy had, in the end, saved his life. Whatever his reasons, Kei had to admit, the man had stepped up when it counted. Debts were debts. Kei wasn't the type to ignore them, no matter how begrudgingly. As he shifted Ayaka onto his back, he glanced down at her pale, battered face. She was still conscious. Tough woman. Without saying much, he popped another chakra pill into her mouth. Whether it worked or not was out of his hands. "Don't expect me to thank you," Ayaka muttered coldly, her voice icy as ever. "You just wanted to save your own skin." "Yep," Kei replied casually, a mocking grin on his face. "But I also killed 3 Iwa by myself, none of them small fry. And while you're lying there like dead weight, I even went toe-to-toe with the Tsuchiki's son." "Oh." Ayaka's eyes flickered with something other than ice for once, perhaps curiosity, maybe bitterness. "Impressive. Looks like you'll be climbing the ranks fast once you get back, huh?" "Maybe," Kei shrugged. "That's why I'm the team leader. And judging by how you're doing, looks like you'll be my subordinate for life, Ayaka-chan." Maybe it was the adrenaline wearing off. Maybe it was just nerves catching up to him. But something about this whole conversation, mocking or not, felt almost therapeutic. Ayaka glared at him in silence, face still ghost white. But there was a flicker of emotion there. Annoyance, probably. Kei, on the other hand, felt oddly satisfied. He had vented a bit of his fear through sarcasm, and it helped. What he didn't notice was the strange little smirk forming on Ayaka's lips. The battle was over. But Kei knew he couldn't relax just yet, not with Iwa still likely chasing them down. Fortunately, the chakra pill was kicking in. His strength was returning, little by little. It still wasn't enough to fight, but at least he could run faster with Ayaka on his back. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, Kitsuchi slowly pushed himself up from the ground. He stared at the kunai embedded in his left shoulder, blood trickling down his arm. "If I hadn't dodged at the last second, it would have pierced my heart." Yellow flash. "Minato Namikaze," he muttered through clenched teeth. He didn't dare remove the kunai. The bleeding would only get worse. But even as pain clouded his vision, he burned the name Minato Namikaze into his memory, along with the face of the unknown Uchiha brat who fought like a devil.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of This Uchiha is Way Too Cautious. Do you want to see what happens next, or maybe you'd rather read ahead at your own pace? Check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/mvsensen7, where you'll find early access to upcoming parts and plenty of other fanfiction stories waiting for you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share it with fellow Naruto fans, and subscribe to the channel for more epic adventures. I'll see you in the next episode.